Black infernal mist, a familiar thought flashed through Han Li's mind. The black mist that the stone tower emitted was the strange mist that enveloped half of the peninsula he stayed at. However, the mist from the tower was extremely thin, as if it were being strictly controlled. Han Li felt somewhat alarmed, but since this was a restricted area of the Tian Peng race, he wasn't about to provoke anything. As everyone else did, he flew around the tower. But as Han Li brushed past the tower, he felt an aura from the tower surge, causing his body to quiver as a cold sensation covered his back. This is... Han Li stopped and turned to stare at the huge tower. He simply saw the huge tower continue to emit black infernal mist. At an unknown time, the mist had become denser, with the tower's talisman marks occasionally flickering with rainbow light. It wasn't able to completely block the black chi from rushing it. Fortunately, the rainbow barrier emitted from the top of the tower completely blocked the black chi from leaving the vicinity of the tower. But a short moment later, the black chi caused the seven-colored light barrier to tremble violently, as if it could collapse at any moment. When the nearby Tian Peng beings saw this, they were all dumbstruck and stopped in shock. They all stared at the strange occurrence occurring at the spirit tower. Han Li then sensed his wings tremble and turned burning hot, creating a scalding pain on his back. Han Li's expression vastly changed. Letter 1D4 BB, letter 1D6 33, letter 1D6 26, letter 1D6 26, letter 1D6 38, letter 2 2F, letter 1D6 24, letter 1D4 5C, letter 1D6 2E. At that moment, an incredibly high-pitched shriek whistled from the tower. When the nearby Tian Peng beings heard this, they began to close their eyes and fall from the sky. Although Han Li wasn't as negatively affected, he still felt his spiritual sense become dazed as his burning hot wings immediately lost effect, causing his body to sway. Fortunately, he could still fly without any reliance on the thunderstorm wings. His body promptly flashed with azure light and he steadied himself. Then he looked at the huge tower with horror. A huge explosion boomed and the crystals on the top of the tower brightly shined, causing the rainbow light barrier to shine as well. At that same moment, overlapping cryptic chants sounded out from the tower as if over 100 people were chanting a similar incantation simultaneously. The Tian Peng beings that originally fell then glowed with spiritual light, floating up in the air as a layer of seven-colored light surrounded them. However, the tower released another piercing shriek, and the dense black chi inside began to roil, forming a kilometer-tall huge bird phantom. The hollow figure appeared faintly black. It unfolded its wings to cover the top of the half of the tower and let out a long shriek, causing the black mist to surge several times in size. The surrounding rainbow barrier began to violently warp, exerting a huge pressure. At that moment, the other Tian Peng beings covered in rainbow light began to shake but otherwise appeared fine. In their fear, however, they began to scatter in every direction. Han Li originally thought to immediately fly away, but as soon as the huge black bird phantom appeared, his wings trembled. Suddenly, a huge azure bird phantom appeared from a tremble of his wings. It raised its head and cawed in response to the black bird. Meanwhile, the nearby air became tense, and he felt his body grow heavy, suddenly incapable of movement. In his fright, Han Li emitted brilliant golden light from his body, exerting immense power in his limbs in an attempt to break free. But what immediately caused his heart to sink was, in spite of his body's immense force, he felt the air surrounding him had become as dense as metal. He wasn't able to even move his finger. Han Li's thoughts quickly churned. Just as he thought of using a true devil projection to break free, the incantations coming from the tower changed and became far more clear. The incantation also faintly sounded with booming wind and thunder. Soon after, the strange talisman characters began to appear in the air near the tower and began to float in the black bird's direction. As this went on, the huge crystals on the top of the tower ruptured. A ring of seven-colored suns slowly floated into the air, releasing a brilliant light that covered the black bird phantom. With the brilliant seven-colored light and the talisman characters restricting the black bird phantom, the phantom could only shriek as it helplessly dispersed. Beside, the huge azure bird phantom also vanished. Han Li felt relief at having regained control of his body, but he felt quite bewildered. Apart from the difference in size and color, the shape from the azure bird phantom and the black hollow phantom appeared exactly the same, like a legendary Kun Peng. Could it be a Kun Peng was sealed in the tower? As Han Li pondered with shock, he immediately thought to flee from the scene. But when he swept his sights around him, he wryly laughed and decided to stay still. This was because there were a dozen balls of light that had emerged from the huge tower. In a few flashes, they arrived 100 meters away from him. At this distance, he could clearly see Tian Peng beings through the remaining lights. If he fled now, he would be marking himself as guilty. As he pondered, he decided to wait and see what they would say. He quickly swept his sights past the lights and found 2 late deity transformation-grade beings inside of them. The others were only early and mid-stage beings. Feeling a bit of dread, Han Li didn't dare to provoke them and remained still in the air. With several gusts of wind, the dozen beings unfolded their wings and arrived before Han Li in the blink of an eye, surrounding and staring at him. Of the 2 old men in charge, one of them had a pair of white wings, while the other had wings that were faintly gold. One of them also had a kindly face while the other appeared stern, but like all the others, they were firmly staring at Han Li with an odd look. Although Han Li didn't truly fear the Tian Peng beings, he felt somewhat apprehensive at this current situation. He forced a smile and asked, "May I ask why you've surrounded me?" Greatly against his expectations, the white-winged old man respectfully asked, "Brother, what is your esteemed name? Your face is quite unfamiliar. Are you kin that has recently entered the holy city?" With a few quick thoughts, Han Li answered, "My surname is Han. I've cultivated overseas and have only entered the city today." Seeing that the Tian Peng beings didn't reveal any hostile intentions, he decided to give an answer. "You're from overseas, and you only entered the city today." Han Li's answer greatly shocked the old men, but they soon exchanged a glance and wore an expression of joy. The stern old man solemnly said, "Good, very good. Regardless of where Brother Han came from, your Tian Peng Qi is quite abundant to provoke the Kung Peng spirit in the tower. You could receive the title of Holy Disciple and inherit the Kun Peng True Blood." The Tian Peng True Blood, Han Li was shocked. If it was before, Han Li wouldn't have understood what they meant, but with the True Dragon and Heavenly Phoenix True Blood in his bracelet, he realized how rare this item was. Han Li was startled that such fortune had appeared before him. But with another thought, Han Li felt lacking in confidence. He wasn't truly a Tian Peng being. How could he become their holy disciple? Under closer inspection, his disguise would be revealed. He wouldn't inherit any true blood, but would be provoking the hatred and ire of countless Tian Peng beings. Han Li dryly chuckled and shook his head. "You've made a mistake. I come from an ordinary background. How would I have the qualifications to inherit the true blood? It wasn't me who provoked the scene at the tower." The gold-winged old man seemed to ignore Han Li's words and smiled, saying, "There is no need for Brother Han to shirk this away. A true spirit projection had appeared from your body. Those of us from the tower had clearly seen it. We weren't mistaken. Brother Han must see the elders. Being able to become a holy disciple is a matter of the utmost importance." Han Li inwardly cursed and looked around. He saw the Tian Peng beings looking at him with excitement and determination. "I truly am not any holy disciple. It's fine if you don't believe me. However, I have important matters to attend to, so I must bid farewell." Han Li resolved himself and quickly uttered a few words before vanishing in a blur. He flapped his wings, wanting to use his abilities to fly a distance away, but at that moment he heard a woman's voice. "Outsider, wait. Do you truly plan to leave? If you do, hand over your wings to us." The voice wasn't loud but soft and sweet. When Han Li heard it, he felt as if his spiritual sense shook with astonishing thunder and his face turned unsightly. As soon as those words were uttered, a nearby space fluctuated, and a slender figure silently appeared 10 meters above him. It was a white-robed woman with golden wings. Han Li stared at her and felt his blood run cold. She had an ordinary appearance, but a glistening light was roaming across her body. From her aura, he felt that her cultivation was unfathomably deep. She was a mid-stage body integration-grade presence. Han Li widely opened his eyes. "We pay our respects to the Grand Elder." The deity transformation-grade Tian Peng beings respectfully saluted the young woman as soon as she appeared. This woman was actually the Tian Peng race's Grand Elder. Han Li felt his mouth dry up. The woman calmly commanded, "Let me deal with this person. You should return to the tower and strengthen the seal, pacifying the holy Kun Peng spirit in turn." "As you command." As a clear display of their respect, they immediately followed their orders and returned. The young woman then turned her sights on Han Li. Chapter 14:19, Grand Elder. A bright glint shined from the young woman's eyes and she casually said, "This isn't the place to talk. Follow me." She then turned around and slowly flew off. Han Li's expression wavered for a moment, but he decided to honestly follow her. Facing a fearsome existence like a mid-body integration stage being and finding him in the holy city of a foreign race, Han Li didn't have any opportunity to escape. And when she hadn't turned hostile, he could only comply with her words. The young woman appeared calm like a gentle wind, as if she didn't possess an ounce of anger, but she flew at an immense speed. Han Li had to use a majority of his strength to follow her. He couldn't help but feel overwhelmed as he forcefully stifled his wandering thoughts. After flying for the time it took to finish a meal, the young woman brought Han Li to a solitary cylindrical building that was 100 meters tall. "I pay my respects to the Grand Elder." Two young dainty Tian Peng women walked out from the entrance and wore respectful faces. The young gold-winged woman nodded and walked inside. Han Li closely followed after her into the building, discovering that the interior was more simple than he had expected. Apart from a stone table and a few stone chairs, there was nothing else. The young woman waved her hand and the two maids withdrew. Then she took a seat and faintly moved her lips, uttering, "Sit down. I have questions to ask." "How could I take a seat in front of Senior? I will listen to you with complete attention," Han Li calmly said. "Do as you wish," the woman indifferently replied. Han Li then remained standing stiff and straight. After a moment of thought, she asked, "Are you a human cultivator?" Startled by her question, Han Li carefully asked, "You've visited humans before?" With fluent human language, she said, "Of course, I've even visited one of your three sovereign, the Spirit Sovereign. I held his superb attainments in puppet techniques in great admiration. In truth, there have been many powerful existences in the Flying Spirit tribe that have visited the humans. With regards to the friendly relations between our races, I will answer your questions, but I will expect you to answer my questions as well. Otherwise." When Han Li heard her threat, his calm expression broke for just a moment. "How did Senior see through my disguise? Regardless of anything else, I've refined my thunderstorm wings to completion. I've even altered its aura with secret techniques to match your kin. So long as something on Senior's level doesn't touch me or examine my true essence, they shouldn't be able to discover anything wrong. Otherwise, I wouldn't have dared to enter the clan." This question had left him perplexed. The young woman smiled and answered, "Your transformation is entirely complete. The Kun Peng Chi on your body allowed you to pass through the holy city's grand restriction undetected. If you encountered the other elders in the clan, you would most likely pass them by if they didn't undergo a deliberate examination. However, I am different. As the Grand Elder, I wield the holy artifact, the symbol of power in the clan. Our Tian Peng's holy artifact can see through all illusions and directly peer into your body's true essence. No matter how impressive your illusions may be, they are no use against me." Han Li suddenly came to a realization, but he soon felt extremely gloomy. Han Li wryly laughed. "You mean, if I went to the other branches of your tribe, I wouldn't have been discovered?" The young woman smirked and indirectly answered, "Of the 72 branches, only the Yushui race's holy artifact has a similar ability." Han Li grew silent for a moment. He eventually asked, "What does the holy disciple and the Kun Peng true blood have to do with what is sealed in the Spirit Seal Tower?" The young woman explained, "The Spirit Seal Tower contains the lesser half of a Kun Peng true ancestor's holy soul, which was gathered at astronomical cost during our Golden Age. By relying on the holy soul's power, our Tian Peng race was able to persist until today, but there is no need for you to know the specifics. As for the matter regarding the holy disciple, it is quite simple. It is the general title within the tribe for those with the potential to inherit true blood. If a holy disciple is truly capable of inheriting the holy true blood of a race and passes a trial, they could become the race's holy master." Han Li didn't reveal any surprise when he heard this. He had already guessed as much. He was even disinclined to pursue the topic of the holy master any further. The young woman blinked and asked, "It seems you have no other questions for me, so it should be my turn. The wings on your back should have been refined by something from a Kun Peng. It caused the Holy Spirit to struggle free of the Spirit Seal Tower. This is something that rarely occurred since the creation of the tower." Han Li frowned and truthfully answered, "It wasn't anything much. I only refined a remnant fragment of a Kun Peng feather." The young woman doubtfully said, "Kun Peng feather? That can't be. Even if it was a complete Kun Peng feather, it shouldn't have provoked the Holy Spirit to such a degree." "I'm not sure about this myself." Han Li shook his head, also confused over the matter. After muttering to herself, she indifferently said, "Hand over the winged treasure over to me for inspection." Han Li's heart sank, but when he met her bright jewel-like eyes, he only hesitated for a second before shaking his shoulder. In a flash of white light, the wings disappeared, only for them to reappear in miniature size in his hands. Han Li raised his hand and presented the small crystalline wings to her. Han Li's unexpected forwardness had surprised the Grand Elder. She looked at Han Li's serene face for a long while and eventually took the wings with a smile. While nothing odd appeared on his face, he could only wry laugh in his mind. If he weren't facing a mid-body integration-grade existence, he would have refined the wings into his mind. Even if he was forcibly detained, he'd most likely be able to still use the wings' spatial abilities and directly summon them back. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have given them over. The young woman held the thunderstorm wings in hand and closely examined them for a short moment. A curious expression soon appeared on her face. She flicked her finger and sent the wings back in Han Li's direction. Relieved, Han Li had the wings silently disappear in a flash of white light and momentarily reappear on his back. The young woman appeared indifferent at the sight and slowly asked, "In truth, not only do the wings have the true ancestor Kun Peng feather, but it also has the feature of the heavenly phoenix. I have a rough understanding of how this came to be, but I'd like to hear how you acquired the Kun Peng feather." Han Li was surprised when he heard this, but he didn't conceal anything and described the battle he witnessed between the Kun Peng and the Rahu at the realm boundary. When the young woman finished listening, she appeared pensive. A moment later, she examined Han Li once more and said, "Brother Han, would you be interested in entering our Tian Peng race and becoming our holy disciple?" Han Li was dumbfounded. Han Li blinked and asked, "Did I hear correctly? Does Senior wish for me to join your race?" "That's right. I have a plan in mind, but the matter is incredibly important. I'll need to discuss the matter with the other elders." Han Li went silent for a moment and eventually noted, "But I am a human, not a true Tian Peng being." "So you still don't know. Normally, Kun Peng feathers and other Kun Peng items are left behind from deceased Kun Peng. However, the feather you have refined was an item left behind from a living Kun Peng true ancestor. The feather contains an aura several times stronger than an ordinary Kun Peng feather. In addition, this feather most likely contains blood essence that you haven't yet perceived. Since our Tian Peng race had been the descendants of a Kun Peng true ancestor, and you've refined the Kun Peng item, you may have refined the Kun Peng blood into your body as well. It wouldn't be mistaken to consider you our kin." Her words left Han Li at an even greater loss. A short moment later, Han Li woke up from his amazement and he looked at the young woman with narrowed eyes. He laughed and said, "I heard that your Tian Peng race's current holy master has already perished, and now there is no one in your race that can inherit the Kun Peng true blood. It is also said that the Flying Spirit tribe is possibly removing your race from the 72 branches. Could this be true?" "How do you know about that?" The young woman's face slightly changed, and the image of a golden bird appeared behind her. The phantom simply unfolded its wings, but Han Li felt an immense pressure on his shoulder, and he soon heard his bones begin to crack. With a thud, Han Li's legs sank a half-foot deep in the stone floor. Han Li's complexion also turned incredibly pale. But at that moment, the young woman frowned and the bird phantom disappeared. In the blink of an eye, the young woman restored her calm and said, "I don't know how you came across this information, but I hope you'll keep it secret for the time being. I don't wish for the holy city to fall into chaos. Also, there is a mistake in your words. We do have 2 holy disciples that can inherit the true ancestor blood that we've kept concealed. However, their cultivation is still too low to succeed in the trial placed by the various races. That is why I've invited you to join our clan." After shifting his eyes, a thought quickly went through his mind and he smiled. "The Grand Elder means that I'll be standing in the 2 holy disciples' place as their protector." The young woman calmly said, "That's right. Although you do have the qualifications to join our Tian Peng race, you are human after all. Even if you pass through the trial, it is impossible for you to become our race's holy master. However, fellow Taoist Han can provide support to the other 2 holy disciples as a fellow holy disciple and help them pass the trial. If you agree, I won't treat you unfairly. Not only can you fuse a bit of Kun Peng true blood into you, but will thank you in other ways as well." Such fortune would cause an ordinary person to rejoice and promptly agree, but Han Li simply blinked and didn't immediately answer. The young woman didn't urge him, and simply remained seated as she stared at him. In the time it took to finish a cup of tea, Han Li eventually said, "For the matter of being a holy disciple, Senior would have an outsider like me enter your race. The trial must be quite dangerous. Could you first give me an explanation?" "It is true the trial is quite dangerous. The various races' disciples have a 60 to 70% chance of failure and injury. Furthermore, the holy disciple's cultivation must be at the level of a flying spirit general, what is known to you humans as the deity transformation stage. But now, our holy master has unexpectedly perished, and our holy disciples are only early spirit general stage. They still aren't prepared. If they attempt the trial, they will most likely fail. Although I don't know much about your abilities, since you were able to cross most of the Feng Yuan continent over here, your strength should be significant. Even with the danger in the trial, it shouldn't be a problem for you. Han Li's eyes stirred and he solemnly asked, "They are only at the stage of a spirit general." "Don't worry, I won't trick you," the young woman smiled. With a moment of thought, Han Li eventually said, "I'll need some time to consider it." The young woman appeared calm as if having expected this answer. "The matter is extremely important, so consideration is expected. How about this? I'll give you 3 days before I expect your answer. During this time, you are free to roam the city and no one will come to bother you. Furthermore, I'm named Jin Yue. Remember that name." Han Li uttered a word of thanks and bid farewell without any hesitation. When Han Li left, he blurred and vanished without a trace. Jin Yue smiled and sipped the teacup that was on the table. "Grand Elder, did you truly release him?" Gray light flashed from the wall, and 2 Tianpeng beings appeared. Jin Yue glanced at a tall, red-bearded old man and asked, "What? How did you think I'd treat that person?" The lofty, red-bearded old man rubbed his hands and said, "There is no need for us to pass off the foreign being as our holy disciple. Wouldn't it be better to force him to leave behind the wings and select someone better to inherit the true blood?" The young woman sneered and bluntly answered, "If it were that easy, why would I go through the trouble of saying that to a foreign being? I would just kill him and take the wings away." The petite, beautiful woman standing at the old man's side hastily fixed her jacket and respectfully said, "Then the Grand Elder means—" Yue pondered for a moment and explained, "I hold the most understanding of humans among the entirety of the Tianpeng. The humans are different from us in which their bodies' powers are common, and most of their abilities lie in the treasures they've refined. Furthermore, they can temper their treasures for long periods and thoroughly refine them with themselves. We can take it away and possess it, but it will be difficult to rid the treasure of the original master's markings in a short amount of time. Furthermore, the treasure's might will greatly decrease from when it was used by its original owner. I've already inspected the treasure to verify this. With the information I have and the trial of the holy disciple soon being imminent, we don't have the time to seize his treasure and bestow it to our kin." The red-bearded old man shook his head. "So it was like that. But even so, must we hand over the true ancestor's blood to this outsider? This isn't some small matter." A clear glint shined from the young woman's eyes. "Elder Su, are you confused? If our race doesn't pass the trial of the holy disciple, the entire race will be absorbed by the other branches. Giving him some true blood is minor in comparison. Besides, we can consider other options to prevent this from happening." The dainty middle-aged woman was startled for a moment and smiled. "He, the Grand Elder's words are reasonable. After this outsider helps us through this calamity, this spirit general-grade existence will be completely at our mercy." Yue coldly glanced at the beautiful woman and emotionlessly said, "We cannot kill him. Even if he is a foreign being, he's fused Kun Peng true blood into his body and can be considered half our kin. Our Tian Peng vows will restrict us. Furthermore, he will be our benefactor if he truly aids us through calamity. If it isn't necessary, we mustn't harm him, but we'll be able to restrict him in other ways. From now on, he won't be able to leave the holy city." The red-bearded old man said, "So that's the case. Should we inform the gatekeepers or send people to follow the outsider in secret to keep him from escaping?" Jin Yue aloofly said, "There is no need for Elder Su to worry. I've performed a small trick on his wings. If he wants to escape the city, I'll immediately know about it." The beautiful woman's eyes brightly lit up and she grinned. "It seems we've been worrying too much." "That isn't so. Our clan has 5 grand elders and only 3 of us are in the present. The matter concerning our clan's existence is something that we must deliberate. I wouldn't have secretly called you over here otherwise. Do either of you have any objections?" "No, the Grand Elder's method is reliable." Both the beautiful woman and the old man readily agreed. The young woman nodded in response. From the very beginning, none of the 3 Tian Peng elders had even considered that Han Li would refuse. This came as no surprise. After all, Han Li was only a deity transformation grade outsider. How could he refuse their request? At that moment, hundreds of kilometers away, Han Li was flying at a low altitude. Although his expression was ordinary, and he appeared at the various buildings below him with interest. He was inwardly pondering about his dilemma. He had carelessly exposed his identity and found himself in a bad situation. With his rich experience, he figured that no matter if he completed the young woman's request, the result definitely wouldn't be good for him. A bold refusal definitely wouldn't be possible. As for immediately escaping, the thought had already surfaced in his mind several times. But after he swept his spiritual sense past his wings, he could only wryly laugh. The Tian Peng Grand Elder had brazenly placed a marking on the wings. Within a certain area, she'd be able to find him without a doubt. And he wouldn't be able to erase the mark at his current cultivation. At the very least, he'd need to spend many days. The Grand Elder could find him countless times during the duration. It appeared his only option would be to negotiate a few conditions to protect himself. Otherwise, it'd be better to take the risk to flee than to become the holy disciple of foreign race. As for the conditions, he would properly deliberate them once he understood the general circumstances surrounding the Tian Peng race. Fortunately, he's already encountered danger countless times and managed to keep calm even under such a dilemma. As Han Li slowly flew, thoughts quickly flickered through his mind. After some time, Han Li arrived at a lofty bookstore in the Holy City. He spent an entire day looking through a small half of the books there before departing with a tired expression. When he returned to his residence, Han Li shut himself in the honored guest lodge until the morning of the third day. He departed with his objective being the large trade hall that he wanted to go from the very start. He hadn't encountered any trouble along the way. As Han Li flew, he eventually arrived at the edge of the Holy City and stood in front of a strangely constructed building. The building was constructed next to a 3-kilometer-tall mountain cliff, and in the cliff, a huge rectangular plaza was carved out of it. At the end of the plaza, there was a 300-meter-tall arch gate embedded on top of the mountain wall. To either side of the arch, a dozen armed guards were standing in formation. Between them, countless Tian Peng beings rushed to and fro the gate. Han Li simply examined them from a distance for a moment. Then, his wings stirred and he flew among them in a ball of azure light. A guard in front of the gate noticed Han Li. His expression faintly changed before he gave Han Li a deep salute. Han Li nodded to him and boldly walked through. He walked through and saw the space before him brightly light up. There seemed to be an entirely different world past the gate. At a glance, he saw long passages that seemingly had no end. There were also lines to lofty buildings that appeared to be walls. Under closer examination, the halls seemed to have over 10 stores, with each story being 100 meters tall. And every 300 meters in width, there would be a 30-meter-tall hall entrance. Countless Tian Peng beings were flying back and forth, up and down. It appeared this was where the Tian Peng race traded. Han Li immediately followed a wave of Tian Peng beings toward a certain shop close to the second level. After withdrawing his wings, he entered through the door as if he really were a Tian Peng being. After entering through the door, Han Li was immediately greeted by a lively and bustling scene. He had arrived at a small plaza with an area of several thousand feet, and shops of different sizes stood around the entire plaza. At present, there were several hundred Tian Peng beings filing in and out of those shops. At the exact center of the plaza stood a bluestone pole that was over 100 feet tall. Light was shimmering atop the pole, and there seemed to be something engraved on the very top. There were around a dozen people looking up at the pole and discussing quietly among themselves. Han Li made his way over to them with curiosity in his eyes. At the foot of the pole, he discovered that its surface had been split into 2 halves down the center. Both halves were riddled with text, and one side was shimmering with a red color while the other half gleamed with a green hue. Han Li focused his gaze on the 2 different texts to find that they were all names for items, some of which were very familiar while others were quite alien. Furthermore, these lines of text surfaced and vanished intermittently. There was also a middle-aged man who appeared to be a guard seated at the foot of the pole with his eyes half closed. At this moment, a man suddenly forced his way out of the crowd, then strode forward and offered a few spirit stones to the guard sitting by the pole. The middle-aged guard opened his eyes before nodding and handing over a short red stick to this man. The man picked up the red stick and rapidly swished it toward a certain blank patch on the stone pillar. Even though the man was moving extremely quickly, Han Li was able to glean his actions using his spirit eyes. As the short stick swished through the air, a few shimmering red characters appeared before vanishing into the stone pillar in a flash. Moments later, those red characters surfaced on that same spot. Han Li was rather surprised to see this. After a while, someone else strode forward. However, that person completely ignored the middle-aged guard. He merely spread his wings and flew up several tens of feet, then tapped a finger against a few green characters on the stone pillar. All of a sudden, those characters began to glow with a green light, then quickly disappeared into his finger, making his entire body shimmer with brilliant spiritual light. Meanwhile, the Tian Peng being that had traced these characters with fingers cocked his head to the side with narrowed eyes, seemingly receiving some kind of information. After a while, he withdrew his finger and turned before flying directly toward the entrance of the hall. After that, a few more people emulated the first two, either inscribing something on the stone pillar or directly flying toward the pillar to trace the red and green characters. Han Li stroked his chin upon seeing this, and he finally figured out what was happening. In order to confirm his speculation, he strode forward and extended a finger toward a line of green text that appeared near the bottom of the stone pillar. Green light immediately flashed from those characters as a cold sensation traveled straight into his mind, bringing with it a line of information. Selling first-grade flowing light wood, no purchase limit per person, each block costs 30,000 spirit stones, find me on the 4th level, 5th hall, 31st shop. Han Li's lips twitched and he moved to the other half of the stone pillar, then placed his finger over a line of red text. A similar string of information appeared in his mind. Seeking the complete carcass of a phoenix-tailed beast, price will be negotiated face-to-face. Find me on the 9th level, 2nd hall, 10th shop. A peculiar look appeared on Han Li's face. He didn't think that the Tian Peng race facilitated transactions in such a manner. It was quite clear that the lines of text on the stone pillar were all essentially advertisements for people selling or seeking precious items. As such, the pillar acted as a universal directory that made things a lot more convenient for both buyers and sellers. Furthermore, this setup didn't appear to be very difficult to replicate, and there was no reason why it couldn't be implemented in human markets as well. With that in mind, Han Li took a few steps backward and began to carefully inspect the green lines of text, which were advertising items that were being sold. He was planning to read through this information to see if there were any items that were appealing to him. Due to the differences between the human and Tian Peng races, many items were referred to as different names here compared to in the human race. However, for some reason, most of the precious items were still known by the same or similar names. In particular, some materials that were extremely valuable to both races were referred to with identical names. This came as quite a surprise to Han Li when he had first mastered the language of the flying spirit race. However, even though he found this to be rather perplexing, he naturally wasn't going to go around searching for an answer. He merely appraised the stone pillar in silence, looking for anything that caught his eye. All of a sudden, Han Li focused his gaze on a line of green text that had just appeared on the stone pillar, and his heart rate abruptly accelerated. Azure shifting fruit. Who would have thought that something like this would be sold here? An excited flush appeared on Han Li's face. This fruit was the main ingredient for a legendary pill, the heaven-shifting pill, and it was most definitely among the spirit fruits that were most sought after to Han Li. The spirit pill wasn't as extraordinary as the black flame pills, but 3 of those pills could improve the probability of a breakthrough for late spatial tempering cultivators by several tens of percentage points. As such, they were most definitely more valuable than black flame pills in the eyes of the majority of high-grade cultivators, including even some powerful beings at or above the body integration stage. Consuming the heaven-shifting pill alone could naturally assist a spatial tempering cultivator in breaking through a bottleneck, but in reality, most people wouldn't use this spirit pill in such a manner. Most of the people who were seeking this spirit pill intended to consume it in conjunction with other spirit medicines. This was because not only did the heaven-shifting pill itself possess an extraordinary effect, it was able to combine perfectly with most spirit medicines without any conflict in medicinal effects. Most incredible of all was that if this pill were to be consumed with other spirit medicines, there was a certain probability that it could enhance the medicinal effect of those complementary pills by 30% to close to 50%. This meant that if Han Li hypothetically had a spirit pill that could enhance his magic power by the same degree equivalent to the effect of 10 years of arduous cultivation, he could consume it with the heaven-shifting pill, and there would be a certain probability that his magic power would be enhanced by the same extent as 12 to 15 years of arduous cultivation. Furthermore, this effect applied to any other pill. As such, the rarer and more expensive a pill, the more one wanted to consume it with a heaven-shifting pill. If they were to hit the jackpot and be blessed with the enhancement effect, that would naturally be a vast stroke of fortune. As for the probability for this enhancement to actually take effect, that was rather difficult to strictly quantify. There had once been someone who consumed 3 or 4 of these pills in succession, and every pill managed to enhance the effect of the complementary pill that was taken. There were also stories of people selling everything they owned to purchase a few heaven-shifting pills as a final roll of the dice, only to completely fail to be blessed with the enhancement effect, thus leaving them in complete dejection and despair. Even so, as soon as these spirit pills first appeared, countless cultivators had gone insane over them. All of the azure-shifting fruits near the 3 human regions had been taken in just over 1,000 years, and what was even more frustrating was that these fruits took 5,000 to 6,000 years to reach full maturity. Furthermore, each spirit tree only bore a single fruit, and after the fruit was plucked, the tree would lose all of its spiritual chi and be reduced to a normal tree. As such, many major sects and powers had attempted to nurture this fruit on a large scale, but it simply wasn't worth the investment. As such, in the coming years, there would occasionally be some people who were able to source a few of these fruits from deep within the primordial world, and each and every heaven-shifting pill that appeared inevitably led to a bloodbath between high-grade cultivators. Most of them fell into the hands of powerful beings at or above the body integration stage. When Han Li had first heard about this spirit fruit in Deep Heaven City, he was naturally extremely interested in it, and he dreamed of being able to mass-produce it using his green liquid. Unfortunately, even azure-shifting fruit seeds were an extremely rare type of spirit medicine, and it had a very short shelf life. As such, not even a single one of these fruits could be found in the 3 regions and 7 territories. Hence, Han Li could only stifle his excitement and lament his bad luck. However, now that he was seeing the spirit fruit on the stone pillar, he was so excited that he could barely contain himself. He disregarded everything else on the stone pillar as he immediately flapped his wings and rose into the air, reaching the middle of the pillar in a flash before laying a finger on that line of text. Brilliant green light flashed, and a string of information instantly appeared in his mind. However, after assessing the content of this string of information, Han Li's brows furrowed slightly. "I have to meet the seller in person. That might be a little troublesome," Han Li murmured to himself as the excitement on his face faded. However, seeing as there was a chance to secure azure-shifting fruits, he naturally couldn't give up regardless of how troublesome the circumstances may be. As such, after a brief pause for contemplation, Han Li flew away as a streak of azure light. After exiting the hall, the flew directly upward, all the way to the 9th level before flying ahead along the passageway. After a while, Han Li glanced at the line of text inscribed above the gates of a certain hall, and he immediately flew in. This hall was identical to the previous one. Both its area and setup were a mirror image of the hall that Han Li had just left. However, there were clearly significantly less Tian Peng beings here than on the lower levels, with only around 20 to 30 people here. Han Li scanned his gaze around the surrounding shops with narrowed eyes, then made his way toward a medium-sized shop situated at a corner of the hall. Letter 1D627, letter 1D4C7, letter 212F, letter 212F, letter 1D464, letter 212F, letter 1D623, letter 1D450, letter 1D630, letter 1D45A. This shop was divided up into 2 floors, and the interior was obscured by a layer of murky azure light. There was a faint red jade plaque hanging above the door, upon which was inscribed the words, "Myriad Lightning Shop." A hint of surprise flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this, before his expression instantly reverted back to normal. He then immediately made his way into the shop, beyond the light barrier, without any hesitation. Thus, he arrived in a spacious room that was around 30 to 40 feet in size. Within the room was a glossy black wooden table and several faint yellow wooden chairs, as well as 7 or 8 wooden shelves that were a little dilapidated. There was a bunch of random merchandise stacked all over the shelves, while a thin middle-aged man who appeared to be the shop owner sat behind the wooden table, along with a pair of Tian Peng beings. Han Li surreptitiously swept his spiritual sense over these 3 people, upon which his expression changed slightly. Those 2 middle-aged Tian Peng beings consisted of a man and a woman, and they appeared to be a couple. They were currently discussing something with the shop owner, and one was an early spatial tempering cultivator, while the other was at the mid-spatial tempering stage. As for that shopkeeper, he was a fearsome late spatial tempering cultivator. Why would a man with his cultivation base be running a shop here? Han Li was rather astonished to see this. At this moment, the couple turned their attention to Han Li. He was clearly an unfamiliar face and only at the mid-deity transformation stage, so they were also quite surprised to see him. Meanwhile, the thin shopkeeper merely glanced at Han Li before withdrawing his gaze as he said in a lazy voice, "Don't even think about my purple immortal wood if you haven't found a spirit magnet. As for high-grade spirit stones, do you think I lack those?" The thin shopkeeper was certainly making no attempt to keep his wealth a secret. "Brother, you asking for a spirit magnet in exchange for purple immortal wood is far too unreasonable. Spirit magnets can only be found deep within the earth abyss. Even the elders of our race wouldn't dare to enter those depths for no good reason, let alone a pair of spatial tempering cultivators like my Tao companion and me," the middle-aged woman argued. "That's not my problem. Do you think I just so happened to stumble across my purple immortal wood? Don't mention this matter to me again unless you secure a spirit magnet," the thin shopkeeper retorted in a cold manner as he rolled his eyes. The couple's expression darkened significantly upon hearing this. However, no matter what they said next, the shopkeeper refused to make any concessions whatsoever. In the end, the couple could only depart in a resigned manner. Throughout this entire process, none of them said so much a single word to Han Li. After the couple had left his shop, the shopkeeper sat down in his chair with an impatient expression and asked, "What do you want, kid?" "I heard that you sell azure shifting fruits here, senior. Is that true?" Han Li asked in a calm manner. The middle-aged man faltered upon hearing this before carefully appraising Han Li, then letting loose a cold harumph as he said, "The azure shifting fruit is one of the most precious items in my shop. There's no way a mere flying spirit general like you can afford it. Don't waste my time." "How would you know if I can afford this item or not if you don't state your price, senior?" A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face, and he refused to leave. "HMPH, looks like you prefer a more violent eviction." The middle-aged flew into a thunderous rage as he abruptly flapped the silver wings on his back toward Han Li. Following a dull thump, a burst of immense power swept toward Han Li, making even the surrounding air tremor and buzz. Han Li's eyelids twitched, but he made no attempt to evade. Instead, he merely raised his hand and brought it down as if it were a sword. A streak of golden light flashed past, slicing apart that burst of enormous power with ease. The vast burst of force brushed past Han Li on either side of his body before landing on the structure behind him with a resounding boom. No wonder you've got some confidence. Looks like you're not just all talk." The thin shopkeeper seemed to be rather surprised. "Do I have the right to hear your price now, senior?" Han Li asked again with a calm expression on his face. "All right, I guess you do, but you're still far too arrogant if you think you can satisfy the condition for my azure shifting fruit," the shopkeeper replied in an indifferent manner. "You'll have to tell me the condition first before I can determine whether I'll be able to satisfy it," Han Li prompted with a hint of a smile on his face. "Seeing as you're so confident and I don't have any other customers at present anyway, it couldn't hurt to tell you my conditions. I trust that I won't have to tell you about just how rare and precious azure shifting fruits are. If you want this fruit, I'll give you 3 choices. You can have the fruit if you can satisfy any of those 3 conditions," the shopkeeper said as his expression eased slightly. 3 choices. Looks like the conditions will indeed be very stringent. Otherwise, you wouldn't be providing me with so many options, Han Li said with a wry smile. I'm glad you're aware of that. If you can supply a legendary infernal lotus flower or dark blood crystal, then I can give the azure shifting fruit to you right away." The middle-aged man chuckled coldly. "Those 2 items are only rumored to exist, and it's yet to confirmed whether they can actually be found in this world or not. There's no way that I could be in possession of those." Han Li immediately shook his head in response. Only rumored to exist, eh?" A deriding sneer appeared on the middle-aged man's face upon hearing this. "Seeing as you think this first condition is impossible to satisfy, then the second one is definitely achievable. If you have 500 or 600 top-grade spirit stones in your possession, I can reluctantly sell my azure shifting fruit to you." 500 to 600 top-grade spirit stones. Surely you jest, senior. Even the elders of the Tianpeng race most likely won't be able to bring out so many spirit stones of that caliber. I can't satisfy that condition either. Han Li's expression was beginning to darken slightly. If the shopkeeper asked him for only 100 top-grade spirit stones, then he could sell the spirit medicines in his possession and perhaps scrape together that many. However, 500 to 600 was far too many, and he didn't even consider it to be a feasible option. HMPH, the azure shifting fruit belongs to me. If I think it's worth that price, then I'll naturally state such a condition, the shopkeeper said in an unfazed manner. Han Li had no response to this. If you can't accept the first two conditions, then the final one will most likely be even more impossible for you. Do you still want to hear it? The middle-aged man asked in a cold voice. Please do tell, Senior, Han Li replied with a dark expression. Upon hearing Han Li's response, a peculiar look appeared on the shopkeeper's face. Only after a long while did he continue, the final condition is not one that can just be satisfied by anyone. Before I disclose it to you, I must ask you something first. Are you proficient in wielding the power of lightning? Lightning? Han Li's pupils contracted in surprise. Indeed, if you don't possess lightning abilities or only have an insufficient grasp of lightning, then there's no need for me to reveal the third choice to you. Han Li was a little perplexed, but after a brief moment of contemplation, he still replied truthfully. If it's the power of lightning, then I can indeed say that I'm rather proficient in it. Is that so? Your words carry no weight. Show me your skills and I'll be the one to decide whether you have the right to hear the third choice. The middle-aged man showed no intention of being swayed by Han Li's words. Sure, Han Li answered before gently flapping his wings. A loud thunderclap immediately erupted as countless arcs of silver lightning abruptly surfaced over his wings. The lightning then intertwined, before compressing to form a dozen or so silver balls of lightning around Han Li in the blink of an eye. Each ball of lightning was comparable to the size of a human fist, and they were crackling and flashing erratically. The fearsome power imbued within these balls of lightning made the middle-aged man's pupils contract, and a hint of elation appeared on his face. You certainly weren't exaggerating. Your lightning prowess is indeed quite remarkable. You have the right to hear the final option. It's actually quite simple. You don't even need to offer anything in exchange for the azure shifting fruit. All you have to do is help me tame a lightning attribute spirit beast. Taming a spirit beast? Han Li's eyes lit up with surprise and a hint of excitement. What? You think it's going to be easy? Truth be told, this spirit beast is rather special. I've already captured it alive, but I've been unable to tame it. I've enlisted the help of many people to try and tame it, but all of them have failed. In fact, there were quite a few of them with insufficient lightning powers and were harmed by backlash from this spirit beast. However, with your proficiency in the power of lightning, it won't be impossible. I have to give you a disclaimer first, though. I don't accept any responsibility if you're injured or killed, the middle-aged man said in a meaningful voice. A lightning attribute spirit beast. Would you be able to tell me what spirit beast that is, Senior? Han Li asked with furrowed brows. I'm afraid I can't tell you that for now. If you do decide to help me, I can take you to see this beast, and you'll know what it is then. A cunning light flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes. Han Li stroked his chin upon hearing this, and he was rather unsettled by this man's ambiguous reply, but he still quickly weighed up the situation. This man was a late spatial tempering cultivator, yet even he couldn't tame this spirit beast, so it had to be quite special in some way. However, he had been quite transparent about the situation aside from his reluctance to reveal just what this spirit beast was, so his offer did appear to be quite sincere. Han Li only spoke again after a lengthy period of contemplation. When you say tame, what exactly do you need me to do, Senior? Your job will be to subdue it for me, so it accepts my master recognition ceremony, the middle-aged man replied without any hesitation. If that's all I have to do, then I'd be willing to assist you, Senior, Han Li also replied quite quickly. Good. I have to prepare some things in advance for the master recognition ceremony. Come back here to find me in 4 days, the shopkeeper said as a smile appeared on his face. I'll be sure do so. Farewell for now, Senior, Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a salute, then promptly departed from the shop. The middle-aged stroked his goatee as he looked on in the direction that Han Li had departed toward, and a hint of excitement appeared in his eyes. After exiting the shop, Han Li didn't immediately leave the exchange center. Instead, he returned to the stone pillar for information exchange, hoping to find some other items that would catch his fancy. Han Li only left the exchange center with an elated expression on his face, right on the cusp of closing time. He had truly reaped bountiful rewards here. Aside from that advertisement for the azure sifting fruit, there were also advertisements on the stone pillar selling many precious materials that were extremely rare among the human race. Some of them were tool refinement materials, while others consisted of spirit medicines and spirit fruits. There was one particular spirit medicine among them that was one of the main ingredients alongside the golden marrow crystal insect for refining the provenance true devil projection. That was naturally a source of elation for Hanley. If he could find the other two spirit medicines required, he'd have all of the ingredients he needed to manifest the true body. With that in mind, Hanley flew into the distance as a streak of azure light. The next day was going to the third day since he made his agreement with the Grand Elder of the Tian Peng race. However, Hanley wore a faint smile as he flew through the air, seemingly having already forgotten about this agreement. "Have you agreed to join our Tian Peng race?" a young woman asked with a pair of bright shimmering eyes. "I won't be allowed to leave if I don't agree, right?" Hanley sighed in a resigned manner. At this moment, he was situated within a pavilion with this young woman, along with an elderly man and another beauty. These two new early body integration stage Tian Peng race elders were currently appraising the thunderstorm wings on his back with scorching yearning in their eyes. "You've made a wise decision, fellow Taoist Han. As long as our race's holy disciple can pass the trial, we'll be sure to repay you." The young woman's voice was filled with elation, but her calm tone also suggested that she had already predicted Han Li's answer well in advance. "If the trial really is as you describe, then I really haven't offered much assistance here. However, at the same time, I don't want to be completely at your mercy once I've outlived my usefulness, so I have two conditions. I hope you can accept those two conditions so I can assist your race's holy disciple without any qualms or concerns," Han Li suddenly said. "Conditions? Go on then," the elderly man prompted with furrowed brows. "I want a Kun Peng relic, as well as the right to record my name on the replica scroll of the Tian Peng vow," Han Li replied with a faint smile. "You know of those things." All three Tian Peng beings' expression changed drastically in unison upon hearing this. "That's impossible. Our race only has a dozen or so Kun Peng relics in total, and every one of them was left behind by our race's past grand elders when they passed away. How could we give one to you? As for the Tian Peng vow, our race only has 3 replica scrolls, and there's no space on them for you to record your name." The elderly man immediately refused with a dark expression. "Indeed, those 2 items are both extremely valuable to our race. Would you be willing to accept any other conditions?" the beautiful woman among the trio asked. The young woman didn't say anything, but she wore a contemplative look on her face. "Not asking for the Kun Peng relic solely for myself. Only after consuming the relic will I be able to grasp the power of the Kung Peng and manifest a Kun Peng body. Only then will I be able to pose as your race's holy disciple and not have my cover blown by other races. With the relic in addition to the Kung Peng feather and Kun Peng true blood that I've fused with my body, I should have the right to record my name on a replica scroll of the Tian Peng vow. That's the only way to show me that your race doesn't harbor any ill will toward me after the even," Hanley said in a calm voice. "How do you know of these things? Did someone in our race disclose this information to you?" the elderly man asked with a steely expression. "That shouldn't be the case. Fellow Taoist Han stayed for an entire day within the omniscient pavilion in the city, so he most likely gathered this information from the books in there. I almost forget that all humans can possess eidetic memories once they reach a high enough cultivation base," Jin Yue said in a calm voice. "Even so, we absolutely cannot accept these conditions." The elderly man shook his head in a stubborn manner. "Why not? If a holy master doesn't appear among your race during this trial, you'll most likely be removed from the 72 branches of the flying spirit race, and you'll be forcibly conquered by other more powerful branches. Compared to that, I think what I'm asking for is very reasonable, unless the 3 of you were planning to turn on me after the event from the very beginning," Han Li said in a slow voice. Both the elderly man and the beautiful woman's expressions darkened upon hearing this. After a brief silence, Jin Yue suddenly said, "All right, I accept your conditions." "You can't. Grand Elder, we should discuss this matter in greater depth." Both of the other elders hurriedly tried to dissuade her. "There's no need for further discussion. It's just as fellow Taoist Han has said, this crisis could quite possibly spell the downfall of our race. In contrast, his conditions are indeed very reasonable. I'm making an executive decision here. Speak no further on this matter," Jin Yue said in a cold voice as she raised a hand toward the 2 elders. The 2 elders glanced at one another hesitantly upon hearing this, but they decided to keep their mouths shut in the end. "I can accept the conditions you stated, But in order to ensure that you'll do everything in your power to assist our two holy disciples to pass the trial, I'll need you to sign a blood vow. If no holy master emerge from our race following the conclusion of the trial, as the Grand Elder I can sacrifice some of my lifespan to remove you from the Tian Peng vow, then kill you on the spot. Jin Yue's gaze suddenly became as sharp as daggers. Han Li's heart stirred slightly in response, but he merely put on a faint smile and said, "Rest assured, Senior. If the holy disciples fail to pass the trial due to lack of effort on my part, then I'm willing to accept any punishment you hand down to me." "Good, go back and prepare. I'll send someone to get you tomorrow so we can hold your spirit initiation ceremony and officially welcome you into our race," the young woman said in an implacable voice. Han Li naturally had no objections, and he immediately cupped his fist in a farewell salute to the tree elders before departing. The elderly man looked on as Han Li exited the room, then took a deep breath and exhaled before turning to Jin Yue with a heavy expression. "Grand Elder, I still oppose this course of action. I can accept giving him the Kun Peng relic, but if we record his name onto the replica scrolls of the Tian Peng vow, none of our brethren will be able to do anything to him unless he commits the few extremely severe crimes listed in the vow. Beings from foreign races could easily use this against us and bring calamity to our race. I'm naturally aware of this. However, you seem to have forgotten something, Elder Su. The Tian Peng vow can only restrict our brethren. Have you forgotten about that traitor from 3,000 years ago?" A peculiar look appeared on Jin Yue's face as she spoke. Could it be? The beautiful woman among the trio was beginning to understand where this was going. Jin Yue gently stroked her hair as she replied, "A few days ago, I met the flying spirit generals that have recently returned to the city with the worshipful offerings, and I learned some things about that human from them. According to them, this human cultivator appears to only possess the cultivation base of a mid-flying general, but he's actually at least as powerful as an early great spirit general. With him on our side, our holy disciples are virtually guaranteed to pass the trial, so I'm willing to make these concessions. Furthermore, when all is said and done, as long as this human is willing to stay in our holy city and doesn't come into contact with any of his brethren, we don't have to resort to that final step. What we do have to be wary of is those enemies of our race plotting against us during the trial." "Your wisdom is unmatched, Grand Elder." The two elders were greatly reassured. On the other end, Han Li had just arrived back at his residence when he encountered a few visitors. They were none other than Feng Zhao, Bai Lei, and Bai Ning, who had returned to the city with him. The three of them greeted Han Li in a very warm and enthusiastic manner, and stayed to chat with him for the better part of half a day before departing. After seeing off this trio of siblings, Han Li's smile faded as he returned to the room with a contemplative look on his face and closed the doors. Sure enough, 8 Tian Peng beings came to find him the next morning, 4 of which were male while the other 4 were female. Even though their cultivation bases were only at the foundation establishment stage, they were all very young, so their aptitudes were quite brilliant. After casting a glance at the 8 of them, Han Li didn't say anything as he departed behind them toward a certain location in the holy city. After flying over more than half of the entire city, Han Li appeared within a strange building situated on a corner of the city almost half a day later. This building was a massive plaza that kind of resembled an arena. The entire plaza was circular in shape and was surrounded by massive stone walls that were roughly 1,000 feet tall, taking up an area of several kilometers. Atop those stone walls stood hundreds of stone bird statues, and all of them were flashing with different colors of light. They had clearly had some kind of restriction placed on them, and the light emanating from the statues combined to form a rainbow barrier of light that enshrouded the entire plaza. At the center of the plaza stood a sacrificial altar-like tall platform that was entirely constructed from pristine and flawless white jade. Han Li currently stood atop the jade platform with a dozen or so white-robed Tian Peng beings standing around him in a solemn and intimidating manner. There were both men and women among them, and all of them were at the spatial tempering stage. Jin Yue and the 3 Tian Peng race elders stood right in front of Han Li, while a pair of young women who appeared to be servants stood behind them, holding a silver disc each. "Fellow Taoist Han, all of the preparations have been made. In order to completely activate the power of the Kun Peng relic and Kun Peng blood within you prior to the commencement of the trial, the 2 elders and I will be unleashing our abilities to assist you in refining those 2 items in a short time. We'll then be bestowing upon you the transformation technique of our Tian Peng race. I hope you won't disappoint us, fellow Taoist Han." Jin Yue said as she looked directly into Han Li's eyes. Rest assured, Senior. I've already made a promise to all of you, so I'll definitely do everything within my power to assist the holy disciples, Han Li replied in a serious manner. Good. Fuse the Kong Peng true blood into your body first, and Elder Su will activate the power of the spirit blood. Forcibly fuse it with your blood so that they become one and the same. The process will be a little painful, but I'm sure you'll be able to handle it. After that, you can consume the Kun Peng relic, and I'll personally assist you in refining the relic. You have to take care during this process not to suffer backlash and go into qi deviation from the power of the relic. After all, you're not a true Tian Peng being, so this procedure may be rather perilous, Jin Yue cautioned. Han Li naturally nodded in response. Han Li's willingness to cooperate was very pleasing for Jin Yue, and she also nodded before waving a hand behind her. One of the female servants immediately made her way over to Jin Yue in a respectful manner, before offering the silver disc in her hand to the Grand Elder. Jin Yue took an indifferent glance at the silver disc, before flicking a slim finger toward the screen of light. White light flashed erratically before disappearing soundlessly to reveal a small thumb-sized azure vial. The vial was rather antiquated and appeared to be made from neither metal nor jade. Jin Yue looked at the small vial as faint silver light flashed from her body, and her expression suddenly became extremely solemn and dignified. Meanwhile, all of the other Tian Peng beings bowed in unison toward the small vial with expressions of awe and veneration on their faces. Jin Yue began to chant something in a voice that was very pleasant to the ears, and she pointed a finger at the small vial. An azure thread shot forth from her fingertip before striking the vial, upon which it tremored before rising into the air, heading directly toward where Han Li was situated. Han Li immediately sat down onto the jade platform with his legs crossed. At this moment, Elder Su and the beautiful woman raised their hands in unison to summon an object each, one of which was as crimson as blood, while the other carried a refreshing green hue. They were, respectively, a palm-sized crimson lotus flower and a green banana leaf. The crimson lotus flower rotated on the spot, expanding to around 10 feet in size and emanating a faint fragrance. Meanwhile, the banana leaf also expanded to around the size of a grown human amid a burst of green light, and a series of strange green runes appeared over its surface, glowing with a dazzling light. Han Li raised his eyebrows, yet before he could identify what purposes these two items served, the crimson lotus was already descending toward his head. Han Li was initially startled to see this before he suddenly experienced a rush of weightlessness, having been gently carried up into midair by the crimson lotus flower. The faint fragrance of the lotus flower wafted into his nostrils, striking him with a slightly intoxicating sensation. However, Han Li didn't panic in response. Instead, he merely sat at the center of the lotus flower with his eyes narrowed, seemingly having fallen asleep, but he made sure to retain a wisp of clarity in his mind. Elder Su let loose a low cry, and the petals of the crimson lotus flower slowly converged toward the center. In the blink of an eye, all of the petals had joined together to form a vibrant red flower bud. Jin Yue flicked both fingers toward the small vial upon seeing this. Several azure threads shot forth, disappearing into the small vial in a flash. A ball of green light erupted from the small vial, and its lid abruptly vanished as a ball of azure light emerged from within. Following a crisp cry, the ball of light receded and transformed into an azure bird that was several inches in size, and it attempted to spread its wings and fly away. However, Jin Yue was already prepared for this, and she flapped the golden wings on her back. Swaths of golden light immediately swept forth from her wings, completely enshrouding the azure bird within. The bird struggled for a while within the light, before turning into a small drop of azure liquid, with faint undertones of silver light peeking through it. Jin Yue then made a hand seal with a calm expression on her face, before pointing a finger at the drop of azure liquid. The golden tremored before carrying the azure liquid down toward the flower bud. The azure drop of liquid then disappeared into the crimson lotus, amid a dull thump as golden and crimson light intertwined. Right at this moment, Elder Su's body swayed and he appeared on one side of the crimson lotus flower in a wraith-like manner. He then raised a hand and placed it onto the lotus flower before spreading open a pair of silver wings on his back. Silver spiritual light began to surge from his hand into the crimson lotus flower, while the beautiful woman appeared on the other side of the flower and replicated Elder Su's actions. However, the spiritual light flowing from her palm was white. All of a sudden, a buzzing sound rang out from the crimson lotus, and the crimson light on its surface also began to flash erratically. Right at this moment, the green banana leaf hovering midair also descended from above. However, as soon as it came into contact with the crimson lotus flower, the banana leaf self-detonated, following which countless green lines shot forth in all directions before disappearing into the lotus flower. Immediately thereafter, a series of strange green patterns appeared over the surface of the crimson lotus. In the next instant, the crimson light receded, and the buzzing sound also subsided. Elder Su and the beauty paid no heed to this, as they both closed their eyes, focusing wholeheartedly on injecting pure spiritual light into the lotus flower. However, Jin Yue heaved a long sigh of relief upon seeing this, and she smiled as she murmured to herself, "It's just as I predicted. The aura within this human's body is able to accept the Kun Peng true blood. The most important thing now is to see just how much of the Kun Peng blood's power he can activate as a human." After that, Jin Yue turned to the other higher-ups of the Tian Peng race standing nearby, and said in a cold voice, "You've all seen what's happened. The survival of our race hinges on this man. Hence, all of you must keep all information about this man strictly confidential to the outside world. From now on, this man will be known as the third holy disciple that we've been nurturing in secret after sending him far away for cultivation purposes. Understood?" The spatial tempering stage Tian Peng beings stirred as they vowed in unison, "Yes, Grand Elder, we won't tell a single soul." Jin Yue nodded as her expression eased, and she said, "I trust that you wouldn't do something severely detrimental to our sect, either. 2 months from now, I'll select a few people among you to accompany me and the holy disciples to the trial grounds." 2 months? Why are we going so early? Isn't there still a year left? Someone immediately exclaimed. Apparently, a dozen or so races, including the Kai Rong race and the Raven race, requested for the trial to be held earlier than the designated time. Our elders vehemently opposed this proposal on the panel of elders, but it was still passed due to a majority vote. Why, surely they have to at least provide a reason for this, another Tian Peng being chimed in an enraged voice. Of course they've prepared a reason for this. They say that the Earth Abyss has been a little chaotic lately, so it's best to hold the trial earlier in case any mishaps occur due to excessive delays, Jin Yue explained in a calm manner. The demons of the Earth Abyss have always been sworn enemies of our flying spirit race. When has it not been chaotic over there? They're just doing this to target the weaker branches. Another Tian Peng being flared up with rage. There's no point in discussing the matter any further. The panel of elders has already delivered their verdict, so we can only accept it. Aside from the upcoming trial that we have to prepare for, there have also been beings of foreign races that have frequently appeared on our territory of late, and they've been plundering our lands with reckless abandon. I'll assign some troops to some of you to set off immediately and kill off these abhorrent cowards. Make sure to teach all of the other branches a lesson that they won't be forgetting anytime soon." Jin Yue's voice suddenly turned frosty and forbidding as she spoke. "Yes, Grand Elder," the Tian Peng beings answered in unison as they lowered their heads. After that, Jin Yue began to assign missions to everyone, and all of them departed one after another to carry out their designated tasks. The Jade platform became virtually empty in the blink of an eye. Aside from Jin Yue and the 2 elders, as well as the 2 servants standing behind Jin Yue, there was no one else standing on the platform. Jin Yue turned and cast her gaze toward the crimson lotus flower, where the 2 body integration stage elders were still relentlessly pouring forth their spiritual pour, and the flower seemed to have expanded even further. At the same time, the green patterns on the surface of the lotus flower also began to flash erratically as if they'd come to life. Jin Yue suddenly made a grabbing motion toward the silver disc that the other servant was carrying, and a white bead whistled forth from the disc before being drawn into her grasp. She plucked the bead between 2 of her fingers and brought it closer to her eyes before conducting a thorough inspection. All of a sudden, a peculiar look appeared on her face. "Which Grand Elder passed away to produce this relic?" she asked. "It's the relic left behind by the 9th Grand Elder. According to your orders, we found the relic that had been stored for the longest period of time, and most of the power within it should have faded by now," the servant replied respectfully. "The 9th Grand Elder is that Grand Elder Hong Yun, who invented the awakening ability but died after going insane." Jin Yue's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. "That is indeed the relic left behind by Elder Hong Yun. Due to the strange circumstances surrounding Elder Hong Yun's death, aside from his Kung Peng power, there's also a hint of his residual spiritual sense residing within the relic. If it were to be consumed by a cultivator, the wisp of spiritual sense could potentially result in undesirable side effects. As such, it's been stored in a secret chamber this entire time. If you feel it's inappropriate, I can go back and change once right away, the servant explained in an uneasy manner. There's no need for that. This one will suffice. Jin Yue's expression returned to normal as she turned her gaze back to the crimson lotus flower. At this moment, the green patterns on the surface of the flower had begun to twist and warp, and the entire crimson lotus began to swell and bulge. 2 days later, in the air above the Jade platform, a massive azure bird was flying up and down in the sky, leaving a series of afterimages in its wake. Arcs of golden lightning and azure light surfaced over its body, and all of a sudden, it came to an abrupt halt, and it grabbed the air in the distance with its talons in a vicious manner. 10 white claw projections hurtled through the air, slicing a few faint white marks into space before disappearing in a flash. It then violently flapped its wings forward, and a vast expanse of azure light swept forth before transforming into palm-sized blades of wind, enshrouding an area with a radius of over 1,000 feet. A loud boom erupted as the massive azure bird opened its beak to blat forth balls of golden lightning, which crashed into one another to transform the space before it into a sea of lightning. Following a long, sharp screech, the azure bird flapped its wings and abruptly disappeared amid a gust of fierce winds. In the next instant, gale-force winds erupted even higher up in the air, and the azure bird reappeared. Within the halos of azure light, the bird's body expanded rapidly, swelling form around 10 feet in size to over 1,000 feet in the blink of an eye. As it spread its wings, it cast a gargantuan shadow over the entire Jade platform. Meanwhile, the 3 figures standing on the platform were all quite alarmed by the sight of this massive bird. Grand Elder, did you really only feed him that incomplete relic from the 9th Elder? Elder Su asked in an incredulous voice. You suspect that I fed this human some kind of miracle pill? Jin Yue asked in a cold voice as her expression darkened. I wouldn't dare to think that. It's just that this man grasped the manifestation technique so quickly, and the true body he's conjured up is superior to that of many great spirit generals. Does he really hail from the human race? Elder Su mused with a skeptical look. You were the one who infused his body with the cunning true blood. Shouldn't you know better than anyone whether he's a being from our flying spirit race or not? Having said that, it's indeed quite surprising that this man has attained such a powerful transformation. Perhaps the cunning feather and cunning true blood fused with his body have already changed his constitution somewhat. Jin Yue speculated after scrambling for a reason to explain this situation. That makes some sense, the beautiful woman sighed. Meanwhile, Elder Su still wore a skeptical look, clearly not convinced by this. Jin Yue didn't say anything further about this matter as the giant bird in the sky suddenly withdrew its wings, then quickly shrank down to its original size amid a flash of azure light. A loud cry erupted from the bird's beak, and piercing spiritual light flashed as a half-naked man appeared in its place. The man made a hand seal before slowly descending toward the Jade platform with his entire body enshrouded in a swath of azure light. Jin Yue narrowed her eyes as her gaze fell upon the man's chest. There she saw a large azure bird image that was extremely lifelike and shimmering with faint spiritual light. This man was naturally none other than Han Li, who had fused the cunning true blood into his body and also refined the cunning relic. Letter 1D6ATF, letter 1D5FF, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D41E, letter 1D430, letter 1D68T, letter 1D41C, letter 1D698, letter 1D55E. The image on his chest was a sign that he possessed true holy blood and had completely activated it. The same kind of image appeared on the bodies of most holy disciples as well. With that image on his body, even if the beings of the other races were made aware of that fact that he was not a true Tianpeng being, they most likely wouldn't be able to think of any valid excuses to prevent him from participating in the trial. Jin Yue heaved a faint sigh and consoled herself internally with that thought. In contrast, Elder Su and the beautiful woman were feeling quite disgruntled by the image on Han Li's chest. He was a human, yet the true holy image that even most higher-ups of the race didn't possess had appeared on his body. That was very disheartening to them. Golden and silver light flashed, and a set of golden and silver robes appeared over Han Li's body. He then descended toward the 3 elders and cupped his fist in a salute as he said, "Thank you for your assistance, seniors. I've already attained a decent level of mastery of manifestation techniques. Please offer me your guidance if I'm doing something incorrectly." His attitude had suddenly become extremely sincere and respectful. Your manifestation technique is quite splendid already, so there's nothing left for us to teach you. You can go back for now. 2 months from now, I'll take you to the trial grounds. I'll also bring a replica scroll of the Tian Peng vow to you so you can record your name on it. During this time, you're free to go anywhere as long as you don't leave the holy city. By the way, I have to tell you something. Even though you've refined the Kun Peng replica, there may be some residual baleful aura in there that we failed to remove. It'll lurk within your body, but it won't do anything during the near future. I'll help you expel it from our body when you get back from the trials, Jin Yue said in a nonchalant manner. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, but it quickly reverted back to normal. Rest assured, Senior, I'll be sure to attend the trial in 2 months. Jin Yue nodded in response. Han Li immediately recognized that as his cue to leave, so he extended another farewell salute toward the 3 elders before flying away as a streak of azure light. The 3 elders looked on as Han Li disappeared into the distance, and they didn't discuss anything further, but they all wore contrasting expressions on their faces. Jin Yue was looking up into the sky completely expressionlessly, but the 2 other elders both seemed to be deep in contemplation. Half a day later, Han Li was situated within a room on the top floor of the guest tavern, seated on a wooden bed with his legs crossed. He was making a hand seal as azure light flashed erratically all over his body. There was a hint of agony etched on his face, and large droplets of sweat were beading on his forehead. Following a long sigh, Han Li withdrew his hand seal, and the azure light receded as he opened his eyes again. Interesting. I didn't think that this grand elder Hong Yun's residual spiritual sense would be so violent. If it weren't for my great development technique, I would be in some trouble. Thankfully, the spiritual sense hasn't retained any of its spiritual nature, so I can seal it away before refining it little by little, Han Li murmured to himself. In reality, even though it was only a wisp of spiritual sense, it once belonged to a body integration stage being, so it was still extremely powerful and would most likely take him several centuries to completely refine. However, the benefits that he would reap from doing so would be quite significant as well. After refining this wisp of spiritual sense, his own spiritual sense would increase by almost 50%. As for the traces of baleful qi within the relic, he didn't see it as much of an issue as the Provenant's true devil arts was the bane of such things. And Li paused momentarily before abruptly sweeping a hand over the lightning robe he was wearing. Following a loud thunderclap, the robe disappeared into his body as countless arcs of golden and silver lightning. As such, Han Li naturally caught sight of the azure bird image on his chest. HMPH Tianpeng image, more like awakening image. A hint of surprise appeared on Han Li's face as he gently tapped the image with a finger. An incredible scene then ensued. 5 colored lights suddenly flashed from the azure bird image, and in the next instant it transformed into a 5-colored peacock with its tail feathers fully spread open. Brilliant golden light then erupted, and the image transformed into that of a howling golden ape. Finally, white light flashed, and the image completely disappeared. If Jin Yue and the other 2 Tian Peng race elders were present to witness the scenes that had just unfolded, they would be completely flabbergasted. How could a true holy image take on different forms and disappear of its own accord? Generally speaking, once true holy images appeared on one's body, it would remain with that being for the rest of its life, and it wouldn't easily take on any changes. However, Han Li seemed to be very pleased as he looked down at his chest. I've already mastered 3 mantras of the 12 awakening transformations. I'm missing the true bloods of the 5-colored peacock and giant mountain ape, so I can't truly transform into those true spirit bodies. But this ability is astonishingly powerful, nonetheless, Han Li murmured to himself. This cultivation art was something that Han Li had unintentionally obtained from refining some of Hong Yun's spiritual sense, and in theory, it could allow him to take on the forms of 12 different types of true spirits, so its power was undoubtedly downright extraordinary. If he could completely master all 12 true spirit bodies, with the abilities that true spirits possessed, even the true immortals of a higher realm would have to be wary of him. Of course, that was merely an extravagant dream. Even if he were to completely master this cultivation art, he would still only attain a very small amount of the abilities that the true spirits possessed. Unfortunately, even though the true dragon and the heavenly phoenix were among these 12 forms, he still hadn't obtained their mantras yet. These mantras were hidden deeper within the wisp of Hong Yun's residual sense, and he didn't know how long it would take for him to attain them. Otherwise, with the true dragon blood and heavenly phoenix blood he currently possessed, he would be able to immediately attain 2 more transformations. With that in mind, Han Li was feeling rather forlorn. As for the Kun Peng transformation, that was the foundation for the 12 transformations, and it was the one that this Grand Elder Hong Yun was most proficient in during his lifetime. Otherwise, despite his extraordinarily powerful body, there was no way that Han Li would have been able to master the Tian Peng transformation technique to such an advanced degree, even though he'd just come into contact with it. A thought then occurred to Han Li, and a deriding sneer appeared on his face. After refining the relic with Jin Yue's assistance, he didn't receive much an enhancement in the power of his spiritual sense, but he did manage to glean some useful information. This Grand Elder Hong Yun was a brilliant prodigy, the kind that had not been seen for tens of thousands of years. Through his painstaking research of the Tian Peng transformation, he was able to incorporate many more true spirit transformations into this technique, thereby creating the 12 awakening transformations. Unfortunately, even as a body integration stage being and sourcing many types of true spirit bloods over many years, he was only able to invent 12 transformations. After that, his spiritual sense and physical body were no longer able to cope with the demands placed on them, thereby resulting in him being driven insane and killed by backlash from the true spirit bloods. What was quite strange and perplexing to Han Li was that prior to going insane, this Grand Elder had refrained from leaving his mantras and cultivation arts to the Tian Peng race. Han Li was naturally unaware that back when this Hong Yun was the Grand Elder, the Tian Peng race had been at the very height of its power. He was able to ascend to the position of Grand Elder after inventing this cultivation art with his brilliant aptitude, thereby allowing him to rule over the entire Tian Peng race. As such, not only was this cultivation art the key to his success, it also became his best-kept secret, and he didn't reveal any of it to anyone else. All of the other elders at the time only knew that Hong Yun had invented a cultivation art known as the Awakening Arts, but they knew nothing else about it. After that, Hong Yun was driven insane due to true spirit blood backlash and passed away, so the contents of his awakening arts remained a mystery. As for why the awakening arts were imbued within the relic he'd left behind, that was only something known to the heavens. Perhaps it was simply an unintentional gesture by Grand Elder Hong Yun after he had gone insane. Alternatively, perhaps he had managed to retain a final shred of sanity right before his death and suddenly wanted to leave this cultivation art behind for his race, thereby deciding to infuse it into this relic. Han Li didn't delve too much into this matter. Seeing as this cultivation art had fallen into his hands, he naturally wasn't going to return it to the Tian Peng race. Otherwise, the first thing those elders would think of was most likely how to kill him to prevent this cultivation art from being leaked rather than how to thank him. Han Li naturally wasn't going to do something so suicidal. A contemplative expression appeared on his face as he carefully pondered the situation. All of a sudden, a hint of a smile appeared on his face again. In reality, aside from fusing the Kun Peng true blood with his body and obtaining the awakening arts from the relic, he had also reaped another massive reward that filled him with elation. Due to the stimulation his body had received during this process, he was somehow able to break through his bottleneck, so he was now at the late deity transformation stage. With the assistance of the true toad liquid, his cultivation path would progress without a hitch from here onward. The 3 Tian Peng race elders were only astonished by Han Li's exemplary mastery of the Tian Peng transformation technique, but they spoke nothing of the sudden improvement in his cultivation base. They had most likely noticed this, but for body integration stage beings like them, such a minor improvement in cultivation base simply wasn't noteworthy at all. Han Li narrowed his eyes and considered the situation for a while longer before flipping his hand over to produce a green jade vial, then tipping out a few pills from it. After consuming the pills, he closed his eyes and began to cultivate in a seated meditative state again. Having just advanced to the late deity transformation stage, he had to bolster his cultivation base. A day later, Han Li left his residence in high spirits and headed straight toward the exchange center. This was the date on which he had agreed to meet the shopkeeper of the Myriad Lightning Shop. He was determined to secure the azure shifting fruit, so he naturally wasn't going to be absent. The journey was quite smooth, yet when Han Li arrived in that shop on the 9th level again, his expression immediately darkened. "What's going on? Why are these people here? Am I not the only one you made an agreement with?" The one who had spoken wasn't Han Li. Instead, it was a heavily bearded man in a suit of imposing black armor. At this moment, aside from Han Li, there were three other people present. Aside from the thin shopkeeper and the armor-clad man who had just spoken, there was also a young man with a set of delicate facial features present, and he also wore an expression of displeasure on his face. Han Li surreptitiously swept his spiritual sense toward them to find that these two were both early spatial tempering cultivators. HMPH, I never said that I was only going to bring one person with me to help me tame the spirit beast. If anyone wants to leave, feel free to do so. However, don't even think about my ice heart crystal, purple light iron, and azure shifting fruit then. The shopkeeper rolled his eyes with a cold harumph. The young man and the armor-clad man glanced at one another upon hearing this, while Han Li stood on the spot with slightly furrowed brows. All right, so be it. However, if one of us manages to help you tame the spirit beast first, then wouldn't that mean the other two will have to walk away empty-handed? The young man asked. Hee, don't worry about that. I never intended for the three of you to act independently. Instead, all of you are going to need to unleash your lightning powers at once. Otherwise, according to my prior experience, the lightning powers that any single one you possess won't be anywhere near enough. If you three can help me successfully tame the spirit beast, then I'll give all of you the items I promised. The shopkeeper chuckled coldly. The young man and the armor-clad man's expressions eased upon hearing this, and neither of them raised any further objections. The shopkeeper nodded with a pleased expression before turning to Han Li, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. Brother Han, it's only been several days since we last met, and you've already progressed from a mid-spirit general to a late-spirit general. That's truly incredible. I must offer you my congratulations. With your recent progression, your lightning powers will have become even more powerful, right? Thank you for your kind words, Senior. I was merely lucky to have reached this point. As for my lightning powers, they have indeed been enhanced somewhat, Han Li replied half-truthfully with a faint smile on his face. The armor-clad man and the young man also turned to Han Li with surprise in their eyes upon hearing this conversation. Good, seeing as none of you have any objections, then come with me. I've hidden the spirit beast away in an obscure location, the shopkeeper said. I have no objections there, but before this, shouldn't you show us the items that you promised us? The young man asked. The armor-clad man faltered upon hearing this before chiming in agreement. Han Li didn't say anything, but the expression on his face clearly indicated that he also supported this notion. The shopkeeper seemed to have anticipated this request, and he said, No problem. I've already prepared the items in advance, so I'd be happy to show them to you now. The ease with which the shopkeeper accepted this request came as a stark contrast to usual stinginess, and the young man was clearly taken aback, having already prepared a response for a refusal from the shopkeeper. 3 wooden boxes of different sizes were hurled through the air, and it appeared that the shopkeeper really was planning to show them the items he'd promised them. The young man and the armor-clad man were both ecstatic. They swept their sleeves through the air, sending forth swaths of light that caught the oncoming wooden boxes. Han Li's heart jolted, as he also caught the box flying toward him before removing its lid. A mesmerizing medicinal aroma wafted toward him, and a green fist-sized fruit sat within the box. There were even a couple of strange red leaves under the fruit, and Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he extended a finger toward the fruit. The other 2 people also reached for the items in their respective boxes, so they could conduct a more thorough examination. Letter 1D557, letter 1D5FF, letter 1D556, letter 1D410, letter 1D430, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D680, letter 1D428, letter 1D696. However, right at this moment, the shopkeeper suddenly warned, I wouldn't do that if I were you. All of the items in the boxes have restrictions set up on them. If any mishaps occur, you won't be able to pay for those things even if you give me everything you own. All 3 of them immediately faltered upon hearing this. The armor-clad man was a little enraged as he grumbled, What are you trying to do, brother you? How are we supposed to be able to ascertain the authenticity of these items without touching them? With your cultivation bases, you'll have a 70% to 80% chance of verifying these items using your eyes and spiritual sense alone. If you want to completely assess the authenticity of these items, then you'll have to wait until after the event. If the 3 of you are unable to help me tame the spirit beast, then there won't be any need for you to verify the items. Besides, with my reputation, are you really concerned that I would try to deceive you? The middle-aged man replied in a nonchalant manner. The young man stared at the item in the box for a long while before finally making a decision and tossing the box back to the shopkeepers. "All right, we'll trust you on this one. I'm sure brother you wouldn't risk ruining his own reputation over something like this." The armor-clad man carefully examined the object in his box with a hesitant look, but still reluctantly handed over the box in the end. After stowing away the 2 wooden boxes, a pleased look appeared on the shopkeeper's face before he turned toward Han Li. At this moment, Han Li was staring at the azure fruit in the box with blue light shimmering deep within his eyes and a contemplative look on his face. The shopkeeper faltered slightly upon seeing this before asking, "What is it? Are you of the opinion that something is amiss with the azure-shifting fruit, Brother Han?" "Not at all." Han Li shook his head before replacing the lid on the wooden box and tossing it to the shopkeeper as well. The middle-aged man caught the wooden box before taking another meaningful glance at Han Li, then leading the way out the door. Han Li's trio naturally followed him out of the shop. The shopkeeper flew extremely quickly, but Han Li's trio were all powerful cultivators in their own right, and they were able to keep up with ease, flying out of the exchange center before heading directly toward a certain direction in the Holy City. After flying for 2 hours, they arrived in an extremely secluded corner of the Holy City. There were noticeably far fewer buildings here, and very few people in the area. It was quite a sparsely populated place, and the shopkeeper led them on a descent after arriving at a completely mundane-looking short building. This nondescript building was only just over 300 feet tall, and it was split up into 2 levels. As soon as the shopkeeper's feet landed on the ground, the doors of the building were immediately flung open, and 2 men who appeared to be in their 20s emerged from within. They hurriedly extended respectful bows toward the shopkeeper and greeted in unison, "Welcome back, Patriarch. The 2 of you stand guard out here. No one is allowed to enter this place without my permission," the shopkeeper ordered. "Yes," the 2 men answered without any hesitation before positioning themselves on either side of the building's entrance. Han Li glanced at the 2 of them and paid them no further heed after discovering that they were merely core formation cultivators. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper had already entered the building, and the young man and armor-clad man followed suit after a brief hesitation while Han Li brought up the rear. The room wasn't a very spacious one, and all of the decor appeared to be quite plain and mundane. There were 3 square wooden tables and a dozen or so wooden chairs, and those pieces of furniture took up most of the area in the room. There were also several antiquated artworks that were yellow with age hanging on the walls of the room. All of these pieces of artwork depicted demons, beasts, and scenery, and they weren't very noteworthy either. "Brother Yu, is that spirit beast really here?" The armor-clad man couldn't help but ask. This room was quite small, and it really didn't appear as if it could house any powerful spirit beasts, so it was no wonder that the man was having some doubts. "Would I lie to you 3? Come with me," the shopkeeper instructed in a brisk tone as he glared at the armor-clad man. He then made his way over to one of the scenery paintings hanging from one of the walls, and he rustled his sleeve to produce a scroll. The scroll was unfurled, to reveal the exact same scene depicted in the artwork on the wall. Han Li and the armor-clad man both faltered upon seeing this, unable to comprehend what the shopkeeper was doing. However, the young man's expression changed drastically as he caught sight of the 2 pieces of artwork, and he exclaimed, "That's the Zumi Paradise Scroll. You're in possession of the Pentaluster race's most prized treasure." "The Zumi Scroll? No way. Aren't there only a total of 7 of those in the Pentaluster race? How did you manage to obtain one, Brother Yu?" The armor-clad man was very startled to hear this. Han Li had no idea what this treasure was, but his heart stirred upon hearing the word Zumi, as he cast his gaze toward the artwork hanging on the wall. The slightly yellow artwork depicted a small green mountain, and there was a small cluster of buildings on that mountain, but everything was rather blurry and indistinct. "Hee, you sure have a strong discerning eye. This is indeed a Zumi Paradise Scroll. However, it's not one of the 7 scrolls that the Pentaluster race view as their most prized treasure. This is an imperfect Zumi scroll," the shopkeeper chuckled. "So it's a replica." Both the young man and the armor-clad man faltered upon hearing this. A smug expression appeared on the shopkeeper's face as he replied, "Indeed, there aren't many people even in the Pentaluster race who are aware of its existence. Back then, the Pentaluster race used the spirit bones of a 5-colored phoenix to refine a total of 10 Zumi Paradise Scrolls, not 7. Unfortunately, 3 of them were flawed, and their effectiveness was severely hampered as a result. As such, those 3 scrolls were hidden very early on, and their existence wasn't revealed to the rest of the world. Due to various reasons, those 3 scrolls somehow ended up outside of the Pentaluster race and switched hands between several other races. As for how I came about this one, that's not something the 3 of you need to know. Even though it's a flawed scroll, obtaining such a treasure is a vast fortune, brother you, the armor-clad man said with an envious expression. The young man stared at the scroll, and a hint of greed flashed through his eyes. Han Li's expression remained unchanged, but he was also filled with a sense of yearning. Zumi treasures were one of the treasures that he wanted to obtain the most after arriving in this spirit realm. Unlike the false Zumi space refined using spatial rifts in the human world, this was an independent existence and was a true spatial treasure that could be carried. All right, let's go. The spirit beast is in the Zumi paradise. The smile on the shopkeeper's face suddenly faded as he abruptly rustled his sleeve. Incredible scene then ensued. Brilliant 5-colored light abruptly erupted from the scroll before transforming into a vast expanse of light that disappeared into the artwork on the wall. The shopkeeper began to chant something while abruptly pointing a finger at the artwork on the wall. The same 5-colored spiritual light also flashed from the scroll before a swath of light emanated from it. The 5-colored light swept up everyone in the room at the shopkeeper's behest. Following a brief hesitation, Han Li relinquished his resistance in the end and allowed the light to enshroud his entire body, but he surreptitiously injected more power into the protective layer of spiritual light around him. Following another flash of 5-colored light, the room was completely devoid of any people. The piercing spiritual light receded, and when Han Li opened his eyes again, he found himself on a bluestone plaza with a series of buildings of different heights not far up ahead. Han Li narrowed his eyes and discovered that these buildings were rather familiar. They were none other than the buildings depicted on the small mountain in the Zumi Paradise Scroll. After surveying his surroundings, he heaved a faint sigh of relief. He was currently situated atop a small green mountain with blue skies and a few white clouds up above. As expected, he had arrived in a space that was identical to the image on the Zumi Paradise Scroll. This space wasn't very large, looking as if it was only several kilometers in size, but it was surrounded by 5-colored walls of light in all directions. The other 3 people had also arrived in this place not far away from him. Han Li and the other 2 men were looking around with curiosity in their eyes, but the shopkeeper was not in the mood for sightseeing as he hovered directly toward the cluster of buildings up ahead. Han Li's trio also rose up into the air to follow him. Brother Yu, this Zumi space appears to be completely perfect and intact without anything amiss. What is this flaw you were referring to? The young man couldn't help but ask. He, do you think I'll disclose that information to you? It seems to have nothing to do with our deal, the shopkeeper said in a brusque voice as he rolled his eyes. A hint of fury flashed through the young man's eyes upon hearing the shopkeeper's blunt response, but he forced a smile onto his face and said, He, I was merely curious and I bear no ill will. The shopkeeper harumphed coldly, but didn't follow up with any further insults, presumably because he still had to enlist the young man's assistance in their upcoming task. After flashing through the air several more times, he appeared before a pavilion over 1,000 feet away before stopping in midair with his hands clasped behind his back. The pavilion was over 1,000 feet tall and was split into 3 levels. The building was rather antiquated with a wide bottom that tapered to a point at the top. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D493, letter 1D4E, letter 1D65A, letter 1D500, letter 1D486, letter 1D658, letter 1D490, letter 1D4AT. The spirit beast is in this building. Come with me and I'll show you the beast first, the shopkeeper instructed as Han Li's trio gathered around him. The shopkeeper then descended first, and Han Li's trio glanced at one another before following suit. Rather than landing in front of the entrance on the first floor, the shopkeeper drifted over to a window on the second floor before stopping there. Han Li and the others found this to be rather strange, but they also headed to the same spot. After looking in through the window, they were greeted by the sight of a murky silver barrier of light. The entire second floor had been sealed by a restriction. The young man's eyes flashed, yet before he had a chance to say anything, a loud rumbling boom erupted, following which the silver light barrier tremored along with the entire pavilion. Immediately thereafter, a string of thunderclaps erupted within the light barrier in rapid succession. Thunderclaps were the only sounds that the 4 could hear, and they felt as if they were situated in a world of furious lightning, causing their consciousness to drift in an unsettling manner. Han Li was greatly startled by this development, and he immediately activated his great development technique, thereby reinstating his clarity of mind in the blink of an eye. The shopkeeper and the others were all spatial tempering cultivators, so they also quickly recovered after unleashing their respective abilities. Even so, the young man and the armor-clad man's faces had paled significantly. "This is the spirit beast you want to tame, brother you?" the armor-clad man asked as he stared intently at the window. "That's right. Rest assured, fellow Taoists, the spirit beast has been sealed and you won't be in any danger before it's released." The shopkeeper wore a calm expression, but there was excitement shimmering in his eyes. He suddenly flipped over a hand, and a scroll appeared in his grasp following a flash of light. It was none other than that Zumi Paradise scroll. On this occasion, he didn't unfurl the scroll. Instead, he grabbed one end of the scroll while gently tapping the other end toward the light screen. A peculiar turn of events immediately unfolded. The light barrier beyond the wind suddenly shattered like glass before vanishing. The shopkeeper then flapped his wings and entered the pavilion, leaving an afterimage in his wake. The armor-clad man and young man immediately followed suit without any hesitation. Han Li stroked his chin and contemplated the situation for a while before slowly drifting in through the window. The entire pavilion tremored once again amid a resounding boom, and a burst of lightning attribute spiritual pressure swept toward him like a physical wave. Han Li's expression changed slightly, and he was almost unable to repress the urge to evade. However, he remained in the same spot in midair and shielded himself using his divine essence-effused light in the end. Only then did he get a chance to glean his surroundings. The second floor of the pavilion was far more spacious than he'd imagined. It had an area of 2,000 to 3,000 feet, making this place appear as if it were a small plaza. At the center of the cavernous room stood 81 thick copper poles, all of which were shimmering and engraved with all types of demons and monsters. These copper pillars surrounded an area in the center that was over 300 feet wide, and arcs of black lightning were crackling between the bowls amid rumbling thunderclaps, creating a massive prison-like restriction. Within the massive cage, a ball of black mist that was around 10 feet in size was surging erratically, and resounding thunderclaps rang out incessantly from within. Bolts of silver lightning shot forth occasionally from within the black mist, but they would disappear as soon as they struck the black net of lightning, as if they'd met the bane of their existence. "That's the lightning attribute spirit beast in there." The armor-clad man faltered slightly at the sight of the mundane ball of black mist within the cage. "What? Are you thinking that this spirit beast isn't so remarkable after all? This lightning beast's powers are far beyond what you can imagine." The shopkeeper chuckled coldly as he glanced at the armor-clad man out of the corners of his eyes. "Lightning beast," Han Li murmured to himself with furrowed brows. "That's right, that's the name of this spirit beast. I won't tell you about this lightning beast's origins, but what I can tell you is that there is most definitely only one of this lightning beast in this world." The shopkeeper stared intently at the cloud of black mist within the net of black lightning as a hint of deranged insanity appeared on his face. "Really, its attacks don't seem to be all that powerful." The young man's brows furrowed in skepticism. "Attacks? This lightning beast isn't unleashing any attacks. The lightning you see is simply something that it was born with. Let me show you the true appearance and power of the lightning beast," the shopkeeper said with a derisive sneer on his face. He suddenly raised a hand to send forth a streak of white light from within his sleeve. The streak of light surged through the air before striking the base of the thickest copper pole before up ahead. The streak of white light was a snowy white little winged beast with spikes that were several inches long growing all over its body, making it appear as if it were a flying hedgehog. However, a restriction of some sort had clearly been cast onto it, as it was unable to fly at all after landing on the copper pillar, and it merely sprawled down onto the ground, trembling uncontrollably. "That's an inch-light beast." The armor-clad man and young man immediately identified this vicious beast that was vastly renowned within the flying spirit race, and they were barely able to believe their eyes. These little beasts were extremely ferocious, and they dared to engage even spatial tempering stage beings in direct battle. Even though they were pack-dwelling beasts, all of them were extremely vicious. However, the one on the copper pillar was completely timid and docile, and that came as quite a surprise to the two of them. Just as they were thinking this, a large azure hand suddenly rushed out from within the black mist, reaching toward the inch-light beast like lightning. Before the 5 fingers on the hand had even made contact with the little beast, arcs of silver lightning shot forth through the air. The little beast is completely motionless as it lay on the copper pillar, and as soon as the azure hand struck the black net of lightning, the little beast was sent flying by the force of the impact. A low roar erupted from within the mist, and it was filled with unbridled fury. All of a sudden, a burst of piercing silver light radiated from within the black mist, following which a ball of rapidly expanded within the mist with something inside it. Moments later, all of the black mist had been completely dispelled by lightning, revealing a humanoid bird-like demon within the net of lightning. The creature possessed the head of a dove and had azure skin. There was a pair of blue feathered wings on its back, and its upper body was that of a human while its lower body was that of a bird. A hammer and an awl were present on the respective ends of its arms, and its golden eyes were shimmering with a sinister light. Despite the vast knowledge and experience possessed by Han Li's trio, they still couldn't help but draw a sharp breath upon seeing the true appearance of this lightning beast. Before they had a chance to recover from their shock, the lightning beast suddenly let loose a thunderous roar, following which white light flashed, and countless fist-sized balls of white lightning erupted forth. Almost at the exact same moment, the lightning beast flapped its wings in unison, and hundreds of blue feathers shot forth at once. All of them then transformed into arcs of blue lightning that were around a foot in length each. The lightning beast then brought its hammer, and all together with a resounding boom, an extremely thick bolt of golden lightning hurtled forth from the pointy end of the awl, transforming into a golden lightning worm that swept through the air. The lightning beast had unleashed 3 different types of lightning attribute abilities in the blink of an eye, and all 3 of them appeared to be extremely powerful. Han Li's trio were all startled to see this as they reflexively retreated. It didn't seem like the thin net of black lightning would be anywhere near sufficient to keep these 3 lightning attribute attacks at bay. Only the shopkeeper remained on the spot with a confident smile on his face. As soon as the 3 different types of lightning struck the net of black lightning, the 81 copper pillars suddenly buzzed in unison, and the thin net of lightning suddenly thickened by severalfold. As such, it really was able to withstand the lightning beast's powerful attack. The lightning beast let loose a thunderous roar of rage as its golden eyes stared intently at the inchlight beast, but it seemed to possess some intelligence as it unleashed no further attacks. Don't worry, this lightning-binding light formation was something I set up after expending an immense amount of effort, and it can specifically restrict this beast's lightning attribute powers. This lightning beast may be powerful, but there's no way that it can struggle free. The shopkeeper chuckled as he suddenly swept a hand toward the inchlight beast from afar. The little beast instantly transformed into a burst of white light and was sent through the black lightning without any impediment, thus landing right before the lightning beast. As soon as the inchlight beast appeared before it, the lightning beast opened its beak without any hesitation and swallowed the little beast that was completely powerless to resist. It then let loose a low roar of satisfaction before its body instantly shrank. At the same time, a layer of black mist erupted from nearby to completely obscure it from view. Within the restriction, everything had reverted back to the exact same scene that Han Li and the others had originally witnessed. What kind of spirit beast is this lightning beast? I've read countless ancient tomes, but I've never seen any description of a beast that fits this one, the young man asked with an astonished look in his eyes. Didn't I tell you that this beast's origins are very unique, and that it'd be best if you didn't ask about it? All you have to do is help me tame it. The shopkeeper's words seemed to carry a warning. The young man's expression changed slightly, and he raised no further questions. A hint of a peculiar light flashed through Han Li's eyes as he suddenly said, "You said that this beast is unique in the spirit realm, so can I interpret that as an admission that this beast does not hail from the spirit realm?" The shopkeeper's expression changed drastically upon hearing this, but he immediately forced a smile onto his face as he replied, "What nonsense are you spouting, Brother Han? If this beast isn't something from the spirit realm, then how could it have appeared here?" Despite the shopkeeper's denial, all 3 men could tell that he was trying to hide something, and they couldn't help but glance at one another with surprise in their eyes. If this lightning beast isn't from the spirit realm, then could it be a spirit beast that's unique to one of the lower realms? Wait, no, this beast is clearly no less powerful than a spatial tempering being, so there's no way it could exist in a lower realm. In that case, it has to be from a higher realm. It must be from the legendary true immortal realm. The young man completely disregarded the shopkeeper's warning as he mused. The armor-clad man's eyes also gradually lit up as he stared at the black mist within the restriction. However, the shopkeeper seemed to be relieved that they arrived at this conclusion, and a peculiar look appeared on his face as he said, "So you truly believe that this spirit beast is from the true immortal realm?" "Are we wrong? Even if it isn't from the true immortal realm, I still think you should reveal its origins to us, seeing as you want us to help you tame it, brother you. Perhaps a better understanding of this beast will be helpful to us in our attempt to subdue it. If you really don't want to reveal anything, then we won't force you to. We'll just have to regard it as a spirit beast from the true immortal realm, the young man sighed. You dare to threaten me? The shopkeeper's expression instantly darkened. The young man took a half step backward in retreat, but his expression remained calm as he said, even if the three of us were to join forces, we'd still be no match for you, so I certainly wouldn't dare to threaten you, brother you. However, don't forget that my elder brother is the youngest elder of the Tianping race. I'm sure you won't do something reckless that you'll regret later on. Both Han Li and the armor-clad man were both surprised to hear that the young man was the brother of a Tianping race elder, and both of them were forced to look at him through new eyes. Hint of wariness flashed through the shopkeeper's eyes, and after a moment of indecision, he finally said in a cold voice, I suppose there's no harm in telling you the origins of this beast. It's not something that has to be kept strictly confidential anyway, and it would prevent you three from spinning any more ridiculous yarns. The reason why this lightning beast is unique in this world is because it was artificially created by me through gathering the power of lightning, then nurturing it using a secret technique. It is a lightning spirit born from lightning itself, and I've spent most of my life attempting to create one with only this one resulting in success, so it's naturally unique to this world. A lightning spirit, everyone's eyes widened upon hearing this. How is that possible? Even the legendary spirit tribe hasn't been able to nurture a living being from lightning. You may be an extremely powerful cultivator, but surely this is beyond even your capabilities, brother you, the young man said with a skeptical expression after recovering from his initial shock. Han Li and the armor-clad man's brows also furrowed tightly. Much to everyone's surprise, the shopkeeper conceded in the end and revealed, I certainly wouldn't have been able to achieve this through my own research alone, but many years ago, when I was traveling through the territories of several foreign races, I was passing through a place where a certain powerful being had fallen, and I just so happened to stumble upon a spirit beast nurturing secret technique that was passed down from the true immortal realm. This lightning beast nurturing secret technique was the only complete technique that was recorded. After a brief pause, the young man's demeanor suddenly shifted drastically as he smiled and said, if it's a secret technique that was passed down from the true spirit realm, then this is indeed quite plausible. Apologies for my rudeness, brother you. The armor-clad man was also stroking his chin and clicking his tongue with wonder. The shopkeeper wore an expression of displeasure on his face and merely harumphed coldly in response. Meanwhile, Han Li was scrutinizing the lightning beast within the restriction with a hint of intrigue in his eyes. He didn't know whether the shopkeeper had told the truth, but this beast truly was capable of wielding astonishing lighting power, so even if it wasn't a spirit born from lightning itself, it was still a vastly powerful spirit beast. However, even if it possessed spatial tempering stage power and was capable of wielding lightning, that still definitely wasn't worth the immense investment the shopkeeper had made to tame it. After all, just the 3 items that he'd promised to Han Li's trio was definitely not inferior in value to a spatial tempering stage spirit beast, and that wasn't even taking into account all of the time and effort he'd expended to nurture this lightning beast in the first place. It appeared this beast either possessed more abilities than it had just displayed, or it served an extremely important purpose to the shopkeeper. Otherwise, there was no way that he would sacrifice so much to tame it. Not only was Han Li aware of this, the armor-clad man and the young man had also figured this out for themselves. However, all 3 of them simply wanted the treasure they were promised, and they were also fearful toward the shopkeeper's fearsome cultivation base, so they could only pretend to be oblivious. The origins of and uses for this strange spatial tempering stage spirit beast were both rather sketchy, but it wasn't worth offending the shopkeeper just to get to the bottom of things. Letter 1D5F3, letter 1D69B, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D556, letter 1D6A0, letter 1D6AT, letter 1D6AC, letter 1D698, letter 1D46. Alright, everything that needs to be said has been said. Let's get down to business. I'm going to use the restriction to temporarily immobilize the lightning beast. All you 3 have to do is enter the cage and inject your lightning powers into its body. Remember to keep going until I tell you to stop. Otherwise, all of your prior efforts could go to waste, the shopkeeper announced in an implacable tone. Han Li's trio expressed no further objections on this occasion. The shopkeeper nodded before rustling his sleeve, upon which the Zumi Paradise scroll appeared in his hand once again. This time, he tossed the scroll forward, and it immediately unfurled before him. Five-colored spiritual light flashed as the artwork of the Zumi paradise was revealed to everyone again. The shopkeeper began to chant something before pointing a finger quickly toward a certain spot on the piece of artwork. Blue light flashed deep within Han Li's eyes, and he was instantly able to glean what the shopkeeper was doing. The spot that he had pointed to was none other than the tall pavilion that they were currently situated in. In the next instant, brilliant white light erupted from the artwork, and a burst of white mist suddenly appeared. Within the mist, the walls on the first and second floors of the pavilion slowly backed away before vanishing. Han Li's expression changed slightly, yet before he could figure out what those changes entailed, tremors suddenly ran through the ground beneath his feet. The actual pavilion that they were situated in tremored violently as white light radiated from the walls around them. They then backed away before disappearing into nothingness. In the blink of an eye, everyone was situated under the blue sky along with the lightning beast. The ground of the pavilion underfoot had also been transformed into a bare plaza. The black mist within the restriction surged erratically, clearly indicating that the lightning beast had also been alerted by these changes. Han Li stroked his chin, while the young man and the armor-clad man glanced at each with surprise in their eyes. Right at this moment, the shopkeeper let loose a low cry, and a crimson arrow shot forth from within his mouth. The arrow disappeared in a flash into the scroll he was holding, and a loud thunderclap suddenly erupted high up in the sky, following which howling winds were swept up around them. Arcs of silver lightning peeked through the dark clouds amid an incessant burst of rumbling, and it appeared as if a powerful devil were about to descend upon this world. Before Han Li's trio had a chance to ask, the shopkeeper took the initiative and provided an explanation for change. In the past failed experiences, the power of lightning that the three of you possess is most likely insufficient for the task. As such, I've activated all of the world's origin chi within this Zumi Paradise scroll to manifest the power of heavenly lightning in order to assist you three. After this, the scroll will most likely be ruined, so this is my final roll of the dice. I hope the three of you can help me to the best of your abilities, and if you can help me successfully tame this beast, not only will I give you your promised rewards, I'll also throw in a large sum of spirit stones for each of you. The shopkeeper spoke in a very solemn and serious voice. Han Li's trio was elated to hear this, and all of them expressed their willingness to do everything in their power. The shopkeeper nodded in response before abruptly flapping his wings toward the scroll before him. A swath of white light immediately surged forth, sweeping up the Zumi Paradise scroll within it. The scroll rotated within the white light before countless runes of different colors suddenly appeared on its surface. In the end, following a rumbling boom, it transformed into a five-colored pillar of light that disappeared into the dark clouds up above. An incredible scene then ensued. After a bout of tumbling and surging, an earth-shattering thunderclap suddenly erupted within the dark clouds. Immediately thereafter, an extremely vibrant bolt of five-colored lightning that was as thick as a large bowl shot appeared before flashing through the clouds like a massive five-colored python. Five-colored heavenly tribulation, the armor-clad man exclaimed in alarm as the sight of this five-colored lightning. There's no need for panic. This isn't the true five-colored heavenly lightning that appears during a tribulation transcendence for flying spirit true monarchs. It's merely something I've simulated using a wisp of the world's origin chi, and it possesses less than 1,000th of the power of true five-colored heavenly lightning, the shopkeeper consoled in a calm voice. Han Li and the young man also wore horrified looks on their faces, but their expressions eased after hearing this. However, there was still a hint of shock in Han Li's eyes as he looked up at the five-colored lightning in the sky. This five-colored heavenly lightning was rumored to be tribulation lightning for cultivators of the Grand Ascension stage, and even purple-golden tribulation lightning for body integration cultivators couldn't even hold a candle to its extraordinary power. Even if it possessed only thousandths of the power of actual five-colored heavenly lightning, it could still quite possibly be capable of killing any one of Han Li's trio. At this moment, the shopkeeper could no longer pay any heed to Han Li and the others. He was busy casting incantation seals toward the 81 copper pillars up ahead. All of the pillars emitted a burst of ringing before balls of white light surfaced above them, manifesting a series of sinister dragon heads. All of these dragon heads then opened their mouths to blast forth arcs of black lightning. A low roar suddenly erupted within the mist as a ball of silver light hurtled forth. Following a flash of light, the lightning beast had appeared in a corner of the net of lightning. However, Those black arcs of lightning seemed to have locked onto the lightning beast as they all changed directions to compensate for its movement. The lightning beast let loose a roar of fury, but it was clearly extremely fearful of these arcs of black lightning, as evidenced by the fact that it was desperately attempting to evade them. Thus, a ball of silver light began to spring from one spot in the restriction to another in a wraith-like manner, but the tens of arcs of black lightning followed it relentlessly in hot pursuit. All of a sudden, loud thunderclaps rang out within the restriction, and the shopkeeper also began to chant something again. The black arcs of lightning accelerated even further, leaving trails of afterimages in their wake, and enshrouding the entire space within the restriction in black lightning. Henley looked on with a slightly awestruck expression. He didn't know what kind of lightning ability these black arcs of lightning were, but they were astonishingly fast. If he were trapped within that restriction, he wouldn't be able to evade for long even with his thunderstorm wings. This lightning beast was quite proficient in lightning movement techniques, but it most likely wouldn't be able to last much longer either. Just as he'd expected, only a short while had passed by before the ball of silver light was struck by several arcs of black lightning at once. The lightning beast's body was forcibly revealed in midair amid a howl of anguish, and it was convulsing spasmodically. As such, all of the other arcs of black lightning also converged and struck it as well. A thunderous roar of rage erupted from the lightning beast's beak as crimson, white, blue, and golden lightning erupted from its body at once in a desperate attempt to keep the black lightning at bay. The shopkeeper's eyes lit up upon seeing this, and he took a deep breath before striding forward, then slamming his palm into a copper pillar in front of him. All of a sudden, bursts of white spiritual power flower from his palm into the copper pillar in a frenzy. The thin arcs of lightning being blasted from the dragon heads up above immediately thickened by around twofold amid a rumbling boom. On the other end, the lightning beast was finally unable to resist any longer in the face of the fearsome black lightning, and it plummeted toward the ground as the 4 different types of lightning around its body became extremely dull and lusterless. Meanwhile, the black arcs of lightning in the sky formed a series of black chains that bound the lightning beast tightly, thereby completely immobilizing it. "All right, you can all go in now, fellow Taoists," the shopkeeper announced. He then immediately withdrew his palm from the copper pillar, before casting an incantation seal onto it. The copper pillar tremored before the massive net of lightning crumbled and vanished. Hanley's trio glanced at one another before flying into the cage as streaks of spiritual light without any hesitation. The 3 of them situated themselves around 10 feet away from the bound lightning beast, not daring to get too close to it. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper himself also appeared beside Han Li and the others in a flash. "I'm going to use a secret technique to lock away the source of lightning within this beast's body. The 3 of you, listen for my signal, then inject your powers of lightning into the beast's body," the shopkeeper quickly instructed. He then flipped his hand over to produce 5 pitch-black daggers. The daggers were very light, as if they had been made from wood. However, both the armor-clad man and the young man's expressions changed drastically upon seeing this. Black Star daggers. Despite their obvious astonishment, neither of them asked any questions this time, and the shopkeeper didn't provide any explanation either, so Han Li was left wondering what these daggers could be. Several streaks of black light flashed through the air, and the 5 daggers embedded themselves into the lightning beast's limbs and heart. The lightning beast let loose an earth-shattering roar as it thrashed violently within the black chains. Not a single drop of blood seeped out of its stab wounds. Spiritual light swirled around the 5 daggers, following which the lightning beast's eyes glazed over, and the 4 types of lightning around its body finally disappeared. The shopkeeper blasted forth another ball of white light from his mouth upon seeing this. This was only a fist-sized rhomboid white crystal, but it was imbued with astonishing spiritual pressure, and Han Li's eyes narrowed as he looked on from the side. In contrast with high-grade cultivators of the human race, high-grade beings of the flying spirit race didn't have nascent souls. Instead, they had crystal cores, and those cores were just as important to them as nascent souls were to human cultivators. The shopkeeper threw up a large mouthful of blood essence onto the crystal core, before pointing a finger at it in a solemn manner. The core immediately began to descend, and disappeared into the lightning beast's head in a flash. Almost at the exact same moment, the shopkeeper yelled, "Go!" Han Li and the others immediately sprung into action. Han Li rubbed his hands together, and arcs of golden lightning surfaced between his palms. The armor-clad man opened his mouth, and white lightning could be seen shimmering within. As for the young man, he flapped his wings, and arcs of silver lightning appeared over those wings. A resounding boom erupted as all three types of lightning struck the lightning beast's body in unison. A peculiar scene unfolded. Han Li's divine devilbane lightning and the lightning unleashed by the other two cultivators were all drawn into the 5 black daggers upon coming into contact with the lightning beast's body. Layers of black light then appeared over the 5 daggers before transforming into arcs of black lightning that disappeared soundlessly into the lightning beast's body. The young man and the armor-clad man both faltered upon seeing this, but their lightning output did not cease. Letter 1D41F, letter 1D5FF, letter 1D41E, letter 1D680, letter 1D6A0, letter 1D41E, letter 1D554, letter 1D560, letter 1D696. Thus, the black light shimmering from the 5 daggers became more and more piercing, and the daggers themselves began to tremor slightly. Han Li cast his glance toward the shopkeeper to find that he was seated off to the side with his legs crossed, and his eyes closed while making a strange hand seal, seemingly unleashing some kind of secret technique. Bright white light was radiating around his body, clearly an indication that he was unleashing all of his spiritual power to its maximal extent. Han Li couldn't ascertain what he was doing, so he withdrew his gaze and focused on maintaining his divine devilbane lightning output. After a while, the daggers had absorbed a vast amount of lightning, but they did nothing other than continue to tremor. However, the shopkeeper's face had become extremely pale, and sweat had begun to bead on his forehead. Furthermore, veins were bulging on his forehead as well as on his neck, making it appear as if he were going through intense exertion. Even the spiritual light around his body had dimmed slightly. Meanwhile, the projection of a fist-sized white crystal had appeared on his glabella. The projection was flashing erratically, and it was none other than his crystal core. After some more time had passed, all of the color had drained from the shopkeeper's face, and he suddenly rasped, "Increase your lightning output." Han Li's trio were all rather disgruntled by this instruction. This prolonged period of lightning output had exhausted close to half of their lightning power. If they were to increase their output, they wouldn't be able to last very long. However, they could all hear the resolute and implacable tone in the shopkeeper's voice, so all of them did as they were instructed after only a brief hesitation. Thus, loud thunderclaps erupted as the 3 different types of lightning virtually inundated the lightning beast's entire body. Through their increased lightning output, the 5 daggers embedded within the lightning beast's body finally began to display some changes. The daggers gradually turned a shade of vibrant red, as if they were sucking blood. At this moment, the projection of the crystal core on the shopkeeper's glabella also took on a crimson hue, and it also began to expand and shrink in an erratic manner. After letting loose a low cry, the shopkeeper abruptly opened his eyes to blast forth another item from his mouth. It was a green wooden badge with layers of complex patterns all over its surface, giving it a rather mysterious appearance. As soon as the wooden badge appeared, it flashed over to the lightning beast's head. A plume of thin green threads shot forth from within the badge, before disappearing into the lightning beast's head in a flash. The unconscious lightning beast shuddered, and as the wooden badge buzzed gently, a portion of a miniature green lightning beast projection was drawn out of the lightning beast's body by the countless green threads. An elated look appeared on the shopkeeper's face, and he began to make hand seals while chanting something in a soundless manner at the same time. The buzzing from the wooden badge intensified as the lightning beast projection continued to be forcibly dragged out of its body little by little. All of a sudden, golden light flashed within the lightning beast's lusterless eyes. An explosive thunderclap erupted from its body, and the 5 black daggers were almost completely extricated amid a loud boom. The 4 different types of lightning surfaced over the lightning beast's body again. The shopkeeper's heart jolted with shock, yet before he had a chance to do anything else, piercing green light erupted from the projection of the lightning beast as it disappeared into its body again. At the same time, the lightning beast let loose another thunderous roar, and the arcs of lighting all over its body intensified in power as it struggled and thrashed with all its might. An expression of shock and fury appeared on the shopkeeper's face as he hurriedly turned to Han Li's trio and asked, "Can you increase your lightning output any further?" "No, I'm already at my limit." The young man's face was also rather pale. "I won't be able to either." The armor-clad man appeared to be in slightly better condition, but he also expressed an inability to offer any further output. As for Han Li, he merely shook his head in response. The shopkeeper was slightly disappointed to hear this, but he then immediately gritted his teeth as he said, "All right, looks like we'll have to take the risk then. Maintain your current lightning output, and I'll bring the 5-colored lightning down on this beast. With its power, we have a very good chance at success." Han Li and the others' expressions changed slightly upon hearing this, but none of them objected to this course of action in the end. Thus, the shopkeeper paid no further heed to the struggling lightning beast as he flapped his wings and slowly rose up into the air. After flying into the air until he was over 1,000 feet away from the dark clouds in the sky, the shopkeeper came to an abrupt halt before expelling a mouthful of blood essence with a solemn look on his face. He then pointed his 10 fingers at the blood essence in rapid succession, upon which they transformed into several large blood runes that hurtled toward the 5-colored lightning in the sky. The runes then disappeared into the 5-colored lightning in a flash. The arc of lightning immediately emitted a resounding boom as the dark clouds around it were dispelled. Thus, the 5-colored lightning's intimidating true form was revealed in its full glory. The shopkeeper looked up at the fearsome arc of lightning, and he couldn't help but gulp nervously, even though his mouth was completely dry. He gritted his teeth and expelled a few more mouthfuls of blood essence, all of which also disappeared into the 5-colored lightning as crimson runes. Having expended so much blood essence in one go, the shopkeeper's face was now truly as pale as a sheet of paper. However, his final roll of the dice appeared to be paying off. Following the injection of the blood runes, the 5-colored lightning in the sky finally settled down. Not only had the thunderclaps emanating from it become a lot quieter, the scintillating light radiating from it had also softened significantly. Crimson lines appeared all over the arc of lightning, creating quite a peculiar sight to behold. The shopkeeper was ecstatic upon seeing this, and the chanted something before abruptly flapping his wings upward. Countless crimson threads shot forth from his wings, puncturing the arc of 5-colored lightning in a flash and fusing as one with the crimson lines on its surface, thereby ensnaring the arc of lightning within. The shopkeeper made a hand seal, and piercing white light radiated from his body as one incantation seal after another was cast into the air above. 5-colored lightning rumbled within the crimson threads for a while before shrinking and curling together to form a massive ball of lightning with a diameter of around 10 feet. The surface of the ball was riddled with crimson lines, and the shopkeeper was overjoyed to see this. He swept a hand toward the fearsome ball of lightning, and it descended in an obedient manner. Han Li and the others were all flabbergasted by the scenes unfolding before their eyes. However, the shopkeeper didn't give them a chance to ask any questions. His body swayed, and he abruptly disappeared on the spot. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted as the shopkeeper appeared beside the lightning beast. He quickly raised both hands into the air, and 2 thick pillars of light immediately shot forth, disappearing into a massive ball of lightning, which was currently only several hundred feet away from the ground. As a result, the ball of lightning paused in midair. At such close quarters, Han Li's trio could sense the terrifying power imbued within the ball of 5-colored lightning, and their expressions changed drastically. Thankfully, the ball of lightning had been stabilized in midair by the shopkeeper. Otherwise, all 3 of them would have immediately fled the scene. They certainly weren't going to stand still and allow themselves to be killed. The shopkeeper had no spare capacity to pay any heed to what Han Li and the others were thinking. As soon as he stabilized the ball of 5-colored lightning, he let loose a loud cry, and a small slit suddenly opened up on the crimson line at the bottom of the lightning ball. Following a dull thunderclap, a thin bolt of 5-colored lightning shot forth, heading directly toward the lightning beast down below. The instant that the ball of 5-colored lightning appeared, the lightning beast seemed to have sensed that it was in severe peril. It roared and thrashed with all its might, managing to struggle free from some of the black chains around its body and rising to its feet. However, before it had a chance to do anything else, the 5-colored arc of lightning struck the top of its head with unerring accuracy. The lightning beast was floored before it could utter even a single sound. The shopkeeper was ecstatic to see this. One bolt of 5-colored lightning fell after another at his behest. At the same time, he made a hand seal, and the green wooden badge above the lightning beast blasted forth another plume of green threads. On this occasion, with the combined powers of Han Li's trio along with the arcs of 5-colored lightning, the miniature lightning beast projection was drawn out of the beast's body again in a fit of shock and fury. The projection struggled with all its might, but its lightning powers had mostly been sealed by the 5 black daggers, and its physical body was being immobilized by Han Li's trio and the 5-colored lightning, so it was powerless to resist as it was forcibly drawn toward the wooden badge inch by inch. Green light flashed from the wooden badge, and following a final roar of fury and despair, the lightning beast projection was drawn into the badge. The shopkeeper hurriedly cast one incantation seal after another onto the wooden badge in quick succession, and it was drawn into his grasp as an elated look appeared on his face. "Haha, I've finally done it," the shopkeeper chortled with glee. Han Li's eyes flashed, and the golden arcs of lightning streaming from his hands disappeared. The young man also withdrew his lightning before looking at the motionless body of the lightning beast on the ground, then turning to the green badge in the shopkeeper's hand with furrowed brows. "What's the meaning of this, brother you? Weren't you going to tame this beast?" That was also what Han Li and the armor-clad man wanted to ask. Letter 1D487, letter 1D493, letter 1D486, letter 1D486, letter 1D666, letter 1D486, letter 1D484, letter 1D4F8, letter 1D4AT. He, after extracting the soul of the beast, taming it would be a piece of cake, so 3 of you can rest now. The shopkeeper chuckled as he carefully stowed the green badge away into a jade box with a delighted expression on his face. Han Li and the others glanced at one another, and all of them fell silent as wary expressions appeared on their faces. Something was most definitely amiss here. "Rest assured, seeing as you 3 assisted me greatly in this endeavor, I'll be delivering the rewards I promised you now," the shopkeeper said with a smile before sweeping a sleeve through the air. 3 streaks of white light shot forth toward Han Li's trio, and they were none other than the 3 wooden boxes from earlier. The young man and the armor-clad man were still a little perplexed, but they were overjoyed to see their promised rewards being delivered. As such, they immediately cast aside their concerns and reached out for their respective wooden box. However, piercing blue light suddenly flashed from Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. Immediately thereafter, a set of golden and silver robes appeared over his body before enshrouding the oncoming wooden box within. Meanwhile, Han Li himself hurtled back in retreat. The young man's expression changed slightly upon seeing Han Li's actions, and he immediately realized that something was wrong. However, it was already too late. White light flashed, and the wooden box in his hand suddenly crumbled like a sandcastle, revealing a translucent thumb-sized bead. "Lightning drawing bead," the young man exclaimed in alarm before attempting to fling it away. However, a thunderclap erupted before he could do so, and a ball of piercing white light appeared amid a loud explosion. There was still a small portion of the 5-colored ball of lightning hovering in midair, and as soon as the white light appeared, it split up into 3 arcs of lightning that crashed down from above. The lightning was far too fast to evade, and the young man, as well as the armor-clad man, were instantly struck by the 5-colored lightning and white light. The 2 powers combined as one, and when the light receded, the 2 were revealed with smoke billowing from their bodies, and it was unknown whether they were dead or alive. As for Han Li, his lightning robes had enshrouded the lightning drawing bead before the bead exploded, following which the white light was absorbed into the robe, then flung away into the distance. As such, the bolt of 5-colored lightning was diverted away and struck the ground around 10 feet away from its original target. The entire ground tremored, and a crater with a radius of several tens of feet was left on the ground in the wake of the lightning strike. Han Li had retreated right to the edge of the crater, and he arrested his momentum before looking up at the shopkeeper in an expressionless manner. "Hum?" The man's smile faded as a hint of surprise appeared on his face. However, his surprised expression was then immediately replaced by a deriding sneer. Han Li's eyes flashed, and he suddenly flapped his thunderstorm wings before disappearing into space as an arc of azure and white lightning. Almost at the exact same moment, a pair of green claws swiped past the spot where Han Li had just been standing, unleashing crimson arcs of lightning that flashed through the air. The physical body of the lightning beast that had been bound by the black chains had sprung into action and attempted to launch a sneak attack against Han Li from behind. The only difference was that the lightning beast now had a pair of gleaming black eyes that were filled with intelligence. A hint of surprise reappeared on the shopkeeper's face upon witnessing the failure of the lightning beast's sneak attack. However, his body then swayed as he made a soundless retreat. Right at this moment, a thunderclap rang out above his head as Han Li emerged from within a burst of azure and white lightning. As soon as he appeared, he swept a sleeve toward the nearby copper pillars. Several streaks of piercing golden light shot forth, slicing a few pillars into several segments and destroying the entire restriction. The shopkeeper's retreating figure instantly faltered in midair as he looked on with a dark expression. Han Li crossed his arms and also hovered in midair in silence. At this moment, the lightning beast appeared expressionless behind Han Li, with four-colored lightning crackling around its body, sandwiching Han Li between itself, the shopkeeper. I don't care what your intentions are. I don't care whether you actually wanted to tame this beast or whether you were only interested in its soul. As long as you give me what I want, I can pretend that I saw nothing here, Han Li said in a calm voice. You're just a mere flying spirit general. Do you think you have the right to negotiate terms with me? The shopkeeper asked in a sinister voice. If you were at full health, then perhaps I wouldn't be able to do anything. However, after expelling so many mouthfuls of blood essence in succession earlier, you'd be lucky to have retained even a small half of your cultivation base. Do you really think a spirit beast that's yet to reach full maturity can keep me here? Hanley said in a nonchalant voice as he suddenly swept a hand over his wrist. A streak of black light immediately shot forth, spiraling through the air before transforming into a small monkey. The monkey then pounded its chest, and its body swelled drastically to several 100 feet tall in the blink of an eye. At the same time, it had taken on the form of a sinister ghost and was glowering at the lightning beast with a ferocious light in its eyes. Brilliant golden light simultaneously radiated from Han Li's body as 72 small golden swords hurtled through the air, revolving around his body. His golden provenance true devil projection had also appeared behind him, thus conjuring up 3 heads and 6 arms. He then flipped both hands over at the same time, and one hand was inky black with a miniature black mountain hovering over its palm, while the other was as pristine white as jade, with 5 miniature skulls revolving over its palm. After that, Han Li gently flapped his wings, and azure light revolved around his body, manifesting the projections of a massive azure bird and a 5-colored heavenly phoenix. In conjunction with the provenance true devil projection, all 3 projections had appeared at once, emanating a collective burst of astonishing spiritual pressure. The cold smirk on the shopkeeper's face vastly changed. With his cultivation, he was able to sense the immense power of the projections behind him as well as the incisiveness of the glowing treasures. The weeping soul beast's sinister ghost form was a clear threat as well from its huge size and appearance. After a moment of silence, the shopkeeper harshly shouted, "Who are you? I know a bit of the outstanding disciples of the Tianping race, but none are as outstanding as you." Han Li stared at the shopkeeper and indifferently said, "Who I am isn't important. What is important is how you feel about my proposal. Your cultivation has dropped from late great spirit general stage to early stage. Even if you are keeping any contingency plans, I am half certain I will defeat you. However, I am not interested in a life or death battle. So long as you give me what I want, I will immediately go away." When the shopkeeper heard this, he sized Han Li up. Then after a moment of hesitation, he wryly chuckled. The shopkeeper pursed his lips and probingly said, "Good, very good. The strength you reveal does give you the qualifications to say that, but it is a pity. Even if I agree, I have no azure-sifting fruits to give you. The treasures you saw in the box was an illusion and was produced the secret technique that is unique to our Pentaluster race. You should have had some doubts about it." An illusion technique. I cultivate a technique that can see through illusions. However, the thing I want is in that box. No matter how formidable your illusion techniques are, if you didn't have that item, you wouldn't be able to create such believable illusions, Han Li said with a deep tone. "You want that item?" the shopkeeper said with a surprised face. "That's right, it can't be considered too steep a price," Han Li smiled. "If you want it, I'll give it to you." Without taking any time to consider, the shopkeeper promptly flipped his hand to produce a wooden box and tossed it over. Blue light flashed from Han Li's eyes, and he reached out for it. A wave of blue mist flew out and wrapped around the box, suspending it in the air. Han Li swept his spiritual sense past it, and he opened it with a trace of joy on his face. A wave of medicinal scent assailed his nose, and he saw the azure-sifting fruit. Han Li silently opened his mouth and spat out a cloud of blood essence, instantly sweeping over the wooden box. A rainbow light flashed from the box, and the emerald green fruit began to shrink like an illusion. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a crimson fruit the size of a thumb. The box didn't contain an azure-sifting fruit, but another. When the shopkeeper saw the joy on Han Li's face, he felt some relief and smiled, saying, "Many years ago in a dangerous depth, I unintentionally acquired an azure-sifting fruit. In order to rear the lightning beast, I used it for medicine. Otherwise, I definitely would have given it to you. This is the fruit's pit, but it isn't worth much and it is very different from the fruit's body. But I won't let you take a loss. I'll give you several top-grade spirit stones as compensation." Afterwards, he shook his sleeve and launched an azure leather pouch through the air. Han Li raised his brow. Rather than rashly catching it, gray light swept out from his back and wrapped the pouch in divine, essence-effused light. The gray light suspended the pouch in the air as it harmlessly twirled in place. Han Li instantly swept his spiritual sense into the pouch and faintly raised his lip. In that case, I'll accept your offer. In a gust of wind, the pouch vanished and Han Li put away the fruit core in the box. The shopkeeper's face faintly changed when he saw Han Li's strange display, but it was soon replaced with a smile. Brother Han's abilities are truly unordinary. What does Brother Han plan on doing next? Han Li leisurely said, since I've acquired what I want, I won't involve myself with you any further. But if it is possible, I hope you'll hand over the other two to me. After all, we've come here together. If they disappear, it will be difficult for me to explain to the Tian Peng race. As for what happens next, you'll most likely be unable to stay in the holy city. Not finding Han Li's words odd, the shopkeeper softly chuckled and said, I can do that. However, their character is rather poor. Since they didn't acquire what they wanted and suffered a loss, I fear they wouldn't be appeased. Wouldn't it be better for everyone if they were gone? Although I'd like that as well, I have matters tying me to the Tian Peng race for some time. I'll also think of a way to appease them. Han Li answered with a casual tone. Since Brother Han had said this, I'll leave them to you. At nearly the same time, four-colored lightning flashed around the lightning beast and disappeared from Han Li's back. A short moment later, thunder sounded behind the shopkeeper. As Han Li looked at the lightning beast, a flash of realization appeared from his eyes. It seems Senior didn't plan on taming the beast, but rather use it as an external incarnation. The shopkeeper chuckled and vaguely said, Brother Han saw through it. Han Li smirked and threw to say something else when a humming sound filled the air. The black cloud the shopkeeper summoned had been scattered by a gale. The entire sky was shining faintly yellow, and a soft cry sounded from the air. The nearby space had begun to warp. Han Li narrowed his eyes. The skinny man glanced around and ground. That's the Zumi Paradise's worldly essence chi. It's already reached its limit and it will soon scatter. Let's quickly leave. Yes, I'll have to trouble Senior Yu to open the way. Han Li promptly agreed. You flatter, the shopkeeper ironically said. He swept his eyes past the rainbow phoenix on Han Li's back. Soon after, he muttered to himself a moment, and he grabbed at the air. Rainbow light flickered, and a scroll appeared with glowing light. The scroll spread out, and a pillar of light rushed out from it. A 3-meter-tall light gate appeared in front of them, revealing a mist of white light behind it, as if it led to paradise. Han Li's expression stirred and his shoulders shook, releasing 2 waves of gray light, sweeping up an unconscious large man and youth on the ground. The weeping soul beast transformed into a human tall black ape and stood behind him. Seeing that Han Li collected the large man and the youth, a fierce look appeared from the shopkeeper's eyes, but he eventually decided to take no action. He simply called out, Brother Han, let's go. The two blurred and flew through the light gate one after another. Han Li's surroundings lit up for a moment, and he found himself in the shopkeeper's residence. It was normal as if nothing had happened. On the wall behind them was the Zumi Paradise painting. Han Li felt his heart relax. With his abilities, he had nothing to truly fear from the shopkeeper, but he was no ordinary Great Spirit general-grade being. With his bizarre secret techniques, Han Li was unwilling to have a true fight to the death with him. A crackle then sounded and the ancient painting trembled. It silently turned to ash. Han Li's heart jumped and his face stirred. When the shopkeeper saw this, he wore a sad expression. It was clear he was saddened by the treasure's destruction. Having smoothly returned to his residence, he bluntly said, From your actions, I would think you aren't a very meddlesome person. I'll leave those two to you. As I am injured, I won't be seeing you out. Han Li gave him a quick salute, showing no intention of staying there any longer, and he shook his sleeve, withdrawing the weeping soul beast before walking out in a blur. Behind Han Li were 2 clouds of gray light, pulling along the youth and the black-armored man. From a distance, it looked as if the two were flying closely behind Han Li. When the shopkeeper saw Han Li and company leave, his smile faded. At that moment, 2 of his subordinates walked in from the outside and respectfully stood to the side. One of them carefully asked, Martial Ancestor, are you truly leaving those 3 alone? Will they not cause trouble? The shopkeeper snorted, What trouble could they bring? Even if they come back, they won't find anyone here. Let's tidy up our things and use the underground teleportation formation. We're leaving the holy city immediately. We can't stay with the Tian Peng anymore. Only the Pentaluster race will do. With the identity I prepared in the Pentaluster race, no one will come find me. Yes, Ancestor. With the shopkeeper's order, the two Tian Peng beings raised no objections and immediately acknowledged him. The two quickly entered the other rooms. The shopkeeper stood in place and looked at the large door. A dark expression briefly appeared on his face. Unless it is for something significant, I don't want to take any risks. With my previous temperament, I might have had you stay behind. The shopkeeper muttered. He then took out a medicine bottle from his robes and he swallowed 2 dark green medicine pills. Soon after, he swiped his hand past his face and a blinding white light shined from it. After the light faded, he now had the appearance of a skinny middle-aged scholar. Both his face and his mannerisms were completely changed, as if he were an entirely different person. He walked to a corner of the main hall in a stride and placed his hand against the wall. An underground passage was revealed. Meanwhile, Han Li brought the youth and the large man to a nearby building. With a quick look around, he found that no one appeared to be there. He promptly released his divine essence effused light and immediately dropped them on the ground. After a brief look at the two, Han Li helplessly sighed. You're quite lucky. If I wasn't scared of being implicated with your deaths, I wouldn't have gone through the trouble. As he said this, he flipped his hand and summoned tens of silver needles in his hand. Tore as the needles sank into their bodies. After an unknown time had passed, the gentle young man woke up with a splitting headache. After he opened his eyes, he immediately jumped up out of alarm and noticed Han Li and the black-armored man who earlier regained consciousness. According to his last memories, the youth couldn't help but shout with fury. What happened? I last remember that old traitor you didn't give us any treasure and instead used the lightning drawing bead on us. The large man shook his head, still feeling somewhat muddled. He sat up cross-legged and immediately examined himself with his spiritual sense. A short moment later, he let out a long sigh. How lucky. I've only lost a bit of vitality, nothing too bad. Han Li lowered his head in silence, and his eyes wandered as if he were pondering. The gentle youth looked at Han Li and the large man and said, Do you two know what happened afterwards? The large man wryly laughed. Not much. When I was hit by that rainbow lightning, my soul was shaken and I lost consciousness. The youth turned to Han Li and said, Brother Han, I recall that you've discovered that traitor's scheme and didn't fall into the lightning drawing bead. Han Li sighed and said, As a mere flying spirit general, how could I truly escape? Although I dodged the rainbow lightning, the lightning beast attacked me and was knocked out like you too. You were attacked by the lightning beast. That's right, the beast should have been possessed by the traitor with the crystal core. He definitely would have been able to control its body for a short amount of time. The black-armored man said with an odd expression, The strange part is why would the traitor leave us here when he turned hostile? That is strange. Most likely, the traitor saw that we succeeded and didn't want to give anything. I found it strange that he would trade such rare items for subjugating a spirit beast. He originally planned on denying us from the start. Fancy that his myriad lightning shop was so famous in the holy city. Han Li nodded. If he only wished to deny us treasure, it isn't necessary to kill us. However, while we were unconscious, he escaped. When the large man heard this, he grew pensive and accepted this idea. A cold glint flashed from the youth's eyes and he resentfully said, We cannot allow that traitor to escape. Let's go to his residence, even if he managed to get away. We might be able to get some clues. The black-armored man hesitated before agreeing, but Han Li shook his head. My cultivation is too low. It is fortunate that we still have our lives. I don't want to investigate the matter further, so I'll be bidding you two seniors farewell. The large man and the youth couldn't help but glance at each other in surprise. The young man gritted his teeth and said, Brother Han, are you really going to use that gun when that traitor played us? Your lightning techniques are quite unordinary, so you should be someone of significant background. Even if the traitor's cultivation is far beyond ours, his vitality must have been greatly damaged when he extracted the soul of the lightning beast. If we joined hands, we have nothing to fear. And if that won't do, we can make a report to the elders. Although he possesses some cultivation, would he dare to resist the clan elders? The large black-armored man said, The clan elders, there is no need to alarm them. Let's deal with the matter ourselves. Han Li calmly shook his head. Forget about it. I have other important matters in the holy city. I may as well take care of both matters while I'm there. Since this matter can't be changed, I won't be paying much attention to it. Seniors, I will bid you farewell. He then saluted the two and soared to the sky with the wings on his back, taking off in an azure streak. The young man looked at Han Li flying away with a sullen expression and turned to the large man. He can't recognize the kindness of others. So long as we can find that traitor, the two of us will be able to deal with him. A mere flying spirit general is still something, not much or little. Feeling somewhat worried, the large black-armored man said, "However, since that old traitor you dares to turn back on his word, he must have something prepared. Our chances aren't very high. If we don't investigate, how do we know if we can't block him?" The youth shook his head. The large man hummed several times. "That sounds reasonable. Let's go." Soon after, the two flew in the direction of the shopkeeper's residence. At that moment, Han Li was boldly returning to the honored guest lodge and tossed the matter to the back of his mind. Over the next few days, Han Li sat cross-legged in the building and continuously drank medicine pills to consolidate his late deity transformation stage cultivation. Meanwhile, he spent great efforts to comprehend the Tian Peng's transformation technique. From his efforts, he grasped the transformation technique to the point of perfection. He would be able to use it in a real battle. As time slowly passed by, 2 months quickly passed. One day, as Han Li sat cross-legged on his bed with azure waves of light roaming around him, his expression suddenly stirred and his eyes opened. At nearly the same time, a bright voice leisurely spoke from the outside. "I am Bai. Grand Elder Feng has given me orders to invite you." Han Li narrowed his eyes for a moment before wearing a normal expression. His body moved with an unnatural swiftness as he stood to his feet. Ever since he cultivated the Tian Peng transformation art, he felt his body become far nimbler, and his body techniques have seen an improvement as well. Han Li pushed open his door and walked out, heading directly to the main hall. When he arrived at the hall, there was a yellow-clothed young man with his hands held behind his back. The youth didn't look particularly handsome, but his eyes were clear. When he saw Han Li arrive, he amiably asked, "Are you Senior Han? Under Grand Elder Feng's orders, I've come to remind you to leave." He spoke with complete and free ease despite only possessing early deity transformation cultivation. Han Li glanced at the youth and smiled. Bye. It seems your bearing is unordinary. You should be one of the two holy disciples." Bye saluted Han Li with a smile and said, "I am ashamed. I have failed the deep favor of the elders as one of the holy disciples. I have come to know a bit about Brother Han's circumstances from a few of the elders. I must thank Brother Han for his assistance, or else an elder close to me may find their lives in danger." "You mean to say?" Han Li wore an expression of surprise. Letter 1D4F, letter 1D667, letter 1D65A, letter 1D486, letter 1D666C, letter 1D65A, letter 1D658, letter 1D664, letter 1D662. The youth smiled and said, "My uncle Bai Lei and my aunt Bai Ning." "Your brother Bai Lei's nephew." Han Li looked at the shining golden wings on the young man's back and wore an odd expression on his face. Sensing Han Li's doubt, Bai explained with a smile, "There is no need for Brother Han to feel baffled. It was only after I came of age did I arouse the Kun Peng true bloodline hidden in my body. That is why my wings changed color." "So it was like that. Your luck must have been quite good," Han Li chuckled. Soon after, he followed the Tian Peng holy disciple away from the residence. 4 hours later, Han Li arrived at an imposing hall made of white stone. The hall was serene and had a white stone table and a row of 5 stone chairs to either side of it. Apart from Yin Yue, the red-bearded old man, and the beautiful woman, there was also a tall and thin man wearing black robes. A dark chi faintly emitted from the man's body, concealing his face entirely. He also had a pair of black wings that shined with black light. The stone table had a box as scarlet as fire. Several emerald green tree leaves were intertwined in a pattern on top of it. The green light they emitted made for a stark contrast with the color of the box. Han Li stood in front of the 4 with Bai standing off to the side. The atmosphere in the hall was incredibly heavy, and none of them chose to speak. It was as if no one was there. As for the black-robed man, he examined Han Li with much interest. A moment later, footsteps sounded from outside the hall to reveal a silver-robed woman with white wings. She carried a wind into the hall. Her complexion was like white jade and her eyes were beautiful. There was not a flaw in her appearance. "Lei Lan, you're late." Jin Yue looked at the woman and frowned. The beauty bowed to Jin Yue and spoke with a hoarse voice. "Grand Elder, I've comprehended a few techniques recently and had a sudden understanding, resulting in my tardiness. I hope the elders will forgive me. Since it was related to comprehension, then so be it. Jin Yue's expression relaxed. She uttered a word of thanks and stood to the side. Yue then stared at the Han Li and the holy disciples and spoke with a pleasant voice. You should know why we've gathered you here. The oncoming trial is related to the life and death of the clan. So one of you two must pass the trail and succeed the position as our race's holy master. However, we've received information that there are branches hostile to us like the Kai Rong. They are unwilling to allow us to escape calamity and have most likely placed people in the trials to act against you. The time you've spent as holy disciples is too short. If the other holy disciples violently block you, you won't return. For this reason, I've invited fellow Taoist Han to our Tian Peng race. He will temporarily act as the third holy disciple. He will offer you his strength. Bye-bye, and the newly entered woman raised their head and glanced at Han Li. The young man had a warm, kind gaze, while the woman's expression was as clear as ice. Han Li faintly smiled. The young woman Jin Yue warned. Fellow Taoist Han already refined a Kun Peng feather. Along with the Tian Peng true blood and the Rapik we assisted in merging with him, the other branches can't say anything about not being one of us. But that stands to mention, we'll be avoiding speaking of fellow Taoist Han's circumstances to the outside to avoid unnecessary complications. We'll simply say that he was a clan member that was nurtured overseas. We'll do as you say. The two holy disciples nodded in agreement. Jin Yue nodded with satisfaction and turned to Han Li, solemnly saying, Fellow Taoist Han, I've already called for the scroll containing the Tian Peng vow to be brought out. Furthermore, Elder Shi has also returned. He will participate in dispelling the seal on the scroll. Prepare to sign your name on it. Elder Shi seemed to be the black-robed man standing at the side. I'll have to trouble you, elders. Han Li agreed without any reservations. His eyes then dropped on the wooden box on the table. When Jin Yue saw this, she beckoned to the wooden box. In a brush of wind, the box directly sucked into her grasp and dropped into the young woman's hand. In that next moment, the others also focused their attention there. Jin Yue's expression remained calm as he brushed her fingers past the green leaves on the box. Suddenly, green light shined brilliantly, and she nimbly took the leaves off the box. Without any of the pressure emitting from the leaves, the crimson box ignited into a ball of scarlet fire. Jin Yue grabbed the fire and gave it a nonchalant shake. The flames were immediately extinguished to reveal a half-foot-long scarlet scroll. There were an azure and a red ghost head biting down on either end of it, both appearing true to life. After uttering a brief incantation, she tossed the scroll in front of her, where it suspended itself at a low height. The young woman then unfolded only one of her wings, which soon glistened with golden light. In a flash, the light wrapped around the box. With that done, she turned to the black-robed man and said, Elder Shi, help me dissolve the seal. As the matter concerns the existence of the clan, I will do my utmost, the black-robed man said with a smile. Then one of his wings released a streak of black light which entered the scroll. As for the red-bearded old man and the beautiful woman, they performed a similar action. With the feathers of the four Tian Peng elders absorbed by the scroll, space began to warp. Red light flashed from the entire scroll and expanded several times in size. Both of the ghost heads on either end of it simultaneously opened and revealed blood-red eyes. It was then that they released their grip on the scroll and allowed it to unfold. Red mist flickered from the above of the scroll, condensing into countless roiling talisman characters. A blue light flickered from Han Li's eyes, allowing him to see the scroll's contents clearly. The red light was densely filled with small characters. Most of them appeared to be names. At the very top of the scroll, Tian Peng Vow was written in large golden characters of the Flying Spirit tribe. Afterwards, it listed faint silver characters with contents that appeared similar to a few Tian Peng records. Then it listed rows of dark azure names. Han Li carefully swept his spiritual sense through the scroll. When he made contact with the red list, long clear cries began to sound from it. Soon, the light mist roiled and revealed a mythical bird phantom. As soon as it appeared, it was only a foot tall, but as it brilliantly glowed, it turned the size of a hill, filling most of the hall and completely submerging Han Li and company in it. Han Li and the holy disciples were alarmed, but Jin Yue and the other elders were completely calm. Move back, Jin Yue raised her hand and waved an azure copper mirror at the bird image. The phantom suddenly let out a cry and immediately shattered into tiny fragments that were swept into the scroll in an azure wave. Jin Yue withdrew the mirror and spoke to Han Li with a deep tone. Use your blood essence to sign the scroll. You must use your true name, or there is no saving you from the vow's backlash. Han Li trembled. A few of his original thoughts had been temporarily placed to the back of his mind. He took a deep breath and took large steps forward. He spat out a golden thread. In a golden flash, the thread sliced open a small opening from his finger. Then, under the pressure of his spiritual power, he forced a drop of faintly golden blood essence from it. Yi, Eldershi wore an odd expression on his face. Has Eldershi found something amiss? The red-bearded old man twirled his beard. The black-robed man hesitated and slowly said, "It's nothing. Fellow Taoist Han most likely cultivated a peculiar technique or consumed a few rare fruits which resulted in the color of his blood essence." The old man looked at Han Li and pensively said, "That's true. Golden blood essence is truly rare. His body has most likely been strengthened to a degree for that to happen." The black-robed man smiled and said nothing else. At that moment, Han Li moved in front of the scroll and quickly wrote his name on an empty spot on the scroll. When the drop of faint golden blood essence dropped on the scroll, the words absorbed it. In a flash, it turned into dark azure words. They were dull as if they had been written for many years now. Meanwhile, Han Li faintly sensed that something was gazing at his primal soul, but it immediately disappeared. Alarmed, it appeared that the Tianpeng vow seemed to be something of a gateway. Having thought of this, Han Li felt more at ease. With a binding like this, the Tianpeng elders wouldn't be able to throw him away or their agreement once the matter is settled. As Han Li pondered to himself, Jin Yue had the other holy disciples put down their names as well. Once the scroll trembled, it quickly wrapped itself and the two ghost heads stirred, biting down on either hand. When Jin Yue waved at it, the scroll shrunk and quickly flew into her sleeve. With the scroll retrieved, Jin Yue indifferently said, "All right, since that matter is done, Elder Zai will explain the matters you must pay attention to during the Earth Abyss trial. Remember it well. It could save your life." The Earth Abyss trial is held by the main branch of the Flying Spirit tribe and is held once every 300 years. The red-bearded man began to slowly explain. Han Li and the two holy disciples carefully listened. Several days later, several huge snow-white birds flew out of the main gate of the holy city. After they left the restrictions, they soared to the sky. Han Li was sitting on top of one of the birds. With each wing flap, the white birds flew forward 100 meters. With several flaps, they quickly reached the end of the horizon, turning into black dots. On a mountaintop 3 months later, in a large series of green buildings surrounded by a huge plaza stood over 100 flying spirit tribe beings. At the center, there was a red crane and a brightly colored strange bird. They were unleashing attacks as they fought against one another in midair. The red crane's movements were a marvel. Each claw and peck produced the sound of tearing space, clearly displaying an incredibly sharpness. The brightly colored bird had 4 wings and a horn on its head. The colors on its body released a mist of light that seemed to absorb the crane's attack without a problem. The red crane was furious at this, and suddenly flew 100 meters backward, spreading its wings in the direction of the bright bird. Suddenly, tens of long feathers shot out, blurring into gleaming blades as they flew through the air. They all struck the opposing bird's light mist at nearly the same time. No matter how wondrous the gorgeous light mist was, it groaned and violently trembled upon receiving the attacks of so many blades and began to forcefully tear. The crane was overjoyed when it saw this and was about to release more blades when the bright bird suddenly released a sharp cry. A yellow wave rushed forth and the sharp blades were blown askew. They then turned around as if they were completely under the bright bird's control. The crane was startled and opened its mouth, releasing a white beam of light. It penetrated the bright bird's wind. A strange light flashed from the bright bird's purple eyes, and a black horn suddenly shined with red light from the bright bird's eyes. A red light suddenly shot out from it and struck the oncoming white beam. The air rumbled, and both attacks were nullified. "Brother Zun, what other abilities do you have? I've already fully used all of mine. If you have no others, I am going to attack." The bright bird spoke with a man's voice. A cold snort sounded from the crane. "Your horned vulture tribe only has their many abilities. How could they deal with me?" "Good, then I'll let you witness them. This is my newly cultivated ability," the bright bird strangely said. The bright bird's 4 wings flapped, releasing a wave of bright light. The bright bird transformed into a 3-meter-tall yellow bell. Not good. Everyone who saw this immediately took several steps back in alarm. Only those with more confidence in their cultivation stood still. The yellow bell began to shake itself and let out deep rings. Everyone who heard this felt their minds shaken by the sound. As for the red crane that directly faced most of the bell's power, he wordlessly dropped to the floor. At that same moment, his body flashed white to reveal a white-robed flying spirit tribe man about 30 years old. Another man flew out of the crowd and caught the man before he landed. The yellow bell shook and turned into a black-robed young man. He saluted at the ground and calmly said, "You let me win." As for the crane that turned back into a man, he looked at the black-robed youth with an unsightly expression as he was carried out by his companion.